What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and this week I'm honored to have on the show someone who had a profound impact on my own awakening journey into learning about satanic ritual abuse and how organized child abuse crime syndicates are able to permeate society. Introducing SRA and mind control survivor, man of God, father, husband, writer and author, international speaker, podcast host, entrepreneur, farmer, military veteran, wilderness mentor, executive protection agent, transport specialist, chef for the homeless, market seller, and Linenite, Nathan Reynolds. Nathan was born into a generational incest-based family through the Reynolds bloodline, and from birth was systematically abused, mind-controlled, and mentally fractured to keep his abuse compartmentalized with amnesic barriers. It wouldn't be until later in life and into his marriage that his suspicious past would begin unweaving and unwinding itself, revealing a layered double life checkered with deceit, betrayal, pain, torture, and horrors beyond comprehension, perpetuated on him from the same family, military, government, and community members that were partaking in what Nathan has appropriately coined radically intelligent evil. What Nathan's abusers didn't anticipate was the power of his unbreakable human spirit and the power of Jesus Christ, who quite literally snatched him from the flames. As one of the first males to pioneer speaking out on these horrors publicly on a large scale, Nathan is not only giving himself a voice, but he's speaking for and on behalf of every other male and survivor who has been tortured or threatened into silence. He's a true hero and example of how love, redemption, meaning, purpose, and creation lie on the other side of healing from and breaking the chains of generational trauma. Nathan's book, Snatched from the Flames, One Man's Journey to Uncover the Family Secrets Buried in His Bloodstained Past, details his testimony and path of redemption through the Holy Spirit, and also serves as a beautiful love story between him and his amazing wife, Chelsea. I always say that spouses are the unsung heroes in a survivor's journey, and you're going to find so much inspiration and hope within Nathan's book, despite all the darkness he boldly professes and exposes. This is a book I highly recommend you all go purchase off Amazon as soon as possible. I'll have it linked in the show notes and would love if you all went and read this incredible testimony in its entirety. Nathan also has a fantastic YouTube channel under his name, Nathan Reynolds, where he discusses everything from his abuse to off-grid living, to family life, to linen and wool, beautifully articulated sermons and Bible studies, as well as podcasts he's been on that you can watch right from his channel. Nathan's ability to articulate on a high level things that are, at times, impossible and unfathomable for the general public to understand helps serve society with a clinical and spiritual understanding of these ancient, organized, and ritualistic abuse systems that still exist all over the world today and view children as human capital. I ask you all to please pray over Nathan and his family as he continues to speak out against the powers and principalities of darkness, and support him by, again, purchasing his book, following him on all his social media outlets and YouTube, and donating to his ministry. I'll have all of Nathan's links listed below in the show notes for you. Before we dive into Nathan's story, I wanted to give a reminder that if you are a survivor or whistleblower who wants to share your story on the podcast, or who wants to share any information privately with me, you can now email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com. Please send me a briefing of who you are and how I can support you, whether it's through podcasting or sharing information. I also just started a brand new Substack that you can support at www.emmacatherine.substack.com, where I will be doing weekly recaps and insights on my podcast and using this platform as a place to publicly journal my journey as an advocate for our children. All my social, email, and project links can also be found in the show notes. And as always, I'm so grateful for all your support, everyone. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming this week's guest, voice for the voiceless, selfless and tireless advocate, educator, overcomer, and shaker of the Luciferian kingdom, the one, the only, Nathan Reynolds. Nathan, thank you so much for being here with me today.
It's an honor to be here with y'all. Thanks for having me on, Emma.
The honor's mine. I know I told you before the show, but I found your interview pretty early in my own awakening and your content, and the way that you had explained things really helped click these impossible concepts into my brain in a way that I hadn't heard before. And I have no way of having empathy to the level of actually being able to step in somebody's shoes who talks about this stuff. but your content really opened up my eyes and clicked some of that in place so I could get as close as I could to being able to understand from my perspective. And, you know, your name has come up so many times on this podcast. I've had so many people request me to have you on. So really the honor's mine. It's amazing to see people like you who have been pioneering this, you know, even in a time, it's hard to get people to listen to this now. And years ago when you started, I can't even imagine how hard that must have been. So what was it for you? I'd love to start with maybe you just explaining what was it that made you want to talk about this publicly, because there's so much to lose and there's so much opposition that you face and so much fear, and yet you did it so boldly, you know, with your family behind you. And I'd love for you to just maybe share what your mission was with that, and you know what your inspiration was.
That's a fantastic question. And the catalyst for me that got me willing to speak out was this irrevocable desire that I had in my life for truth to be renowned, to be reverenced, to be the thing that people pursued with a reckless abandonment. And I had been so immersed in a world of deception and confusion for so long. And when I began to truly have understanding in my life, it was like the greatest water to my thirsty soul. And I knew how powerful it was for somebody else to see someone who is bold for their beliefs, speaking honestly and sincerely and vulnerably. And I, during the course of my kind of dismantling these layers of confusion that had so riddled me for so long, I began to see these brave men and women that were out there speaking the secrets, as I had been raised to understand these things as this. These are just things that are to be contained. These are things that are to be just entombed within us until the day of our death. And I instead started seeing people like Russ Dizdar. And the first time I encountered this man he was as bold as a lion. Like there was like this actual tangible reality of seeing someone who was as bold with their words as they were with their actions. And it transformed me to see it destroyed the sissification that I had seen in Christianity and in this cowardice of complacency that I'd been raised up, a society that had neutered and castrated all of its men. And I wanted to be around and in the presence of people that had boldness in their beliefs. And so I started seeing that actionably taking place in the early 2000, in around 2010, 2011, 2012, this kind of rising up of some of these people that came across my life. And it infected me with courage. And courage is, like I try to tell people, that fear that you feel when you're contemplating maybe the opportunity to speak to somebody else about something that it's your deepest shame. It's so unimaginably vulnerable to expose to others and put them in the position of power over you to crush you. You know, anybody who had that first love in their life and they finally got bold enough to share it with the person they cared about, or shared it with the girl, and they're just like, and then they just got crushed to dust. And it's like, it's just that, but it's a generations of secrecy that has been entombed in the souls of these men and these women and these children. And so to look out at the face of this inevitable, insurmountable odds and imagine, can I go out there and weigh into that fray knowing that I'm going to be tormented by people, mocked and scoffed? But it literally, I took courage in these words of the scriptures, this sword of the covenant that I had from my youth studied very diligently. And I saw people that had those convictions in this book. And I knew that if men and women would be bold like that again, if they were willing to cast off the fears of men, that they could be set free to walk in a purity that was totally set apart and made them immortal. It made them indestructible. It made them unconquerable, because you can't kill someone's convictions once they're so rooted out. You can't torture it out of them. You can't rip it out of them. You can't destroy their social network around. You can't character assassinate them enough. There's nothing that you can do to stop someone who has truth and love and conviction. It is indefeatable.
Wow, you can't kill someone's convictions. That was really good and so true. And I think that's something that people get so scared about, is taking that risk, you know. And I love how you said, like, putting yourself out there and giving society the opportunity to just crush you, just laying your heart out there, you know. But also, on the other hand, yeah, you might get crushed 100 times, but that one time that you don't, that one time that you find true love, that one time that somebody listens, that can change your whole life, you know, and make every time that you've been rejected or have had opposition against you completely worth it, you know. And it's something that not a lot of people ever experience because they're scared to put themselves out there, you know. And I think survivors especially understand a different level of that freedom, because you shouldn't be on the other side of this, Nathan. None of these survivors that were in these systems should. They make it literally impossible for somebody to get out, you know. And the fact that you're speaking out in public, it's literally, you're a walking miracle, you know. But understanding that these people that are in these systems never get out, most of them, they're always entrapped in this control and this fake narrative that they have, and this part that they have to play, you know, for society, and then within their role in the cult system. And I think that that courage to break out of that and to say, no, this is me. I don't care if you step on it. Stepping on my heart feels better than containing my heart and having my heart be controlled and not having free will to express it, you know. And I, unfortunately, I think you have to reach really hard levels of, you know, darkness to see that sometimes. But I hope that your words really give hope to the person that's sitting on the other side of this recording, and make them reflect and say, gosh, like, what am I missing out on because I'm so scared to get my heart stomped on, because I'm so scared that, you know, my soul's going to be hurt from all the rejection that I get. So I love that. And you really do, like, you speak with such conviction, you know, and you're such a role model for everything that you preach. And I know people that listen to you completely understand that. And, you know, that's why they respect you so much. So why don't we start diving into your story now, and maybe go back to the beginning? You know, how many generations did this go back to your knowledge, and what does that history look like leading up to your birth? And we can, you know, sort of work our way and re-engineer ourselves back to the present.
Absolutely. Um, well, the family that I was born into, the Reynolds name has a just a kind of a public face out here in the United States and abroad, and it growing up, though, my family did not take on the pose of Easterners. Like in the Eastern United States, the Reynolds family has a much more powerful dynastic stronghold in Kentucky and North Carolina and New York and New Jersey. And my dad had left that world for reasons I did not know when I was growing up. He completely fled everything, left everything behind, and took a backpack when he was young, and just abandoned it and went down to Arizona. And so my family, it seemed as though throughout the past generations of my family that they take their sons and pass them through these fires to these beings, you know. And we read about these things through history and through time, and it's a way that sovereigns have the power to control their underlings, to their servants, their subjects. They've discovered that if you can make someone get to a place where they're willing to sacrifice their own children into an abomination, to desecrate them, to destroy them, to ravage them, to hand them over to people to torment them, they'll do anything for you. They'll obey your every command and your every desire. And this is mind control from all the way to the beginning. You go all the way back to Cain, the one who slew Abel, the first one to shed blood on the earth. Like, once the blood of the innocents gets spilled, it opens up these doors in our hearts, in the worship factory that we were designed to be, and we become consumed with this hunger for and lust and envy and strife, all these like fruits of the flesh, this deep rooted desires of that. And the desire to hold on and maintain power drove people within my family to be willing to continue to pass on generationally each and every child, in particular the sons. I am the firstborn son to my father, and because of that, I experience what the progenitors of this family system that I was born into get, which is, if you want access to the power, if you want access to it, you need to be willing to compromise at such a systemically deep and dark level that they can hold something over you in perpetuity. So if you ever rise to a position of power, they have something to kind of hold over you. But my kind of waking up process and all of that came much more gradually than some, and yet for others it was much earlier in their life and than what is had been for generations. I am so blessed to have been in a time and a generation where these secrets are public. Like when I was young, this stuff was so family secretive that there was no way I had access to even this information. There was no way that I had access to find out answers to these questions that were continually taking my sleep at night. But when I first kind of started out in a town called Flagstaff, Arizona, my family was deeply religious. They were strong Christian believers, people that were hosting missionaries in their houses, people that were really active in the church, and I mean, were participants in every form of church activities that they could get their hands on at that time. And they were a little bit more maybe like Pentecostal in the very beginning. And but they went through many iterations. We went through many denominations over the course of my life. But I was raised up in a Christian home by all intents and standards. But amidst the circumstances of while I was growing up, there was massive warfare, like spiritual warfare, open spiritual warfare, demonic presences, shadow figures, and all these things that were taking place. And my sisters and I would deal with this stuff all throughout our life, not like sleep paralysis and just waking up with marks all over our bodies and blood coming out of us and puking blood in the toilets. And I mean, just all these like horribly insane, graphic, violent things that were taking place in and around us. And there was always this lingering wondering of what the heck is going on. And it's that locking in of confusion that took place so early on me that left me with a confusion of my identity. And at the heart of this entire discussion that we're going to have today is a question about what is your identity? Because ultimately today, this entire world system is trying to bring people back to a confused identity, that they don't know their purpose, their calling, their destiny, and they don't know how to be effective within their mission that they were born for. And so I was left with this constant restlessness, and I had aptitudes that made me inclined towards reading and comprehension in particular. I had a voracious appetite. I just wanted to read and digest everything I could get my hands on. I had a love for learning. I had a deep love for learning, but it was my family would always allow me to basically be in any given school for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years at the most, and then they would remove me and move me to a different school. And in this kept going on all the way until I graduated high school. And I didn't understand what that was really about. Like teachers were always trying to put me in these accelerated and gifted and learning programs, and my family refused to allow it. I was never allowed to rise to any level where I'd be noticed. As soon as I was noticed, I would be removed. So as soon as I had strong bonds, emotional bonds and relational bonds with friends in any school that I was at, and I went to private Christian schools, I went to public schools, I was homeschooled, and I would rotate between those three kind of iterations of the schooling systems. And so I got really, really bitter towards compulsory education. I hated it. I despised it. To me, it was the embodiment of learned helplessness in my life, that I was forced into the system of schooling that was keeping me stupid. And teachers would advocate that I would be, moved up grades, and my parents would always keep me down and suppress me. And so I was not allowed to express any talents. I was not allowed to stand out. I was forced into this funnel of fogginess, this gray man lifestyle. And anytime I tried to be vulnerable and maybe speak out to somebody about pain and abuse that was taking place in my life, there was an immediate removing of our family. We would pick up and leave. Like halfway through my third grade year, my entire family just moved and went to this town called Show Low Pinetop Lakeside in Arizona, the White Mountains of Arizona. And I was just being basically perpetually frustrated, and this is the feeling that I think the majority of survivors battle with their entire life, is not understanding what the heck is going on. And it's so easy to keep a child confused. And I think a lot of people, when they look into this subject matter and they look into it, they look at it from a perspective of comfort and convenience of their own houses, or they get the opportunity to look at it after a night of good rest and the opportunity of knowing normalcy. Whereas when you're being raised in it, you have been so conditioned to not question the narrative that you've been fed throughout your life that you just keep going forward. Like my grandfather, my dad, when we moved to that town in Pinetop, Show Low Lakeside, my great-grandfather, who was a Luciferian more so than anything else, like an illuminist. He was the former president of the American Society of Engineering out in New York City, helped to redesign the Statue of Liberty, and he was a really influential and powerful man. Well, my dad went out there and brought him back to move in with us. And when that happened, I started really suffering tremendous amounts of bodily abuse. And I started developing what was like I had this like vomiting at school all the time. When I would go to school, I would have these panic attacks, and they didn't call it that or whatever. I was just terrified to go to school in third grade. I just absolutely mortified to go to school. And every Wednesday in particular, I was always like, I wanted to go home. I would go to the nurse's station and be like, I'm throwing up. I would go and stand in the bathroom and puke up all this horrific stuff. And then I would leave, and they would send me home. And my mom was like, she would let me come home and she would never tell my dad. And it was like this really strange secret between her and I, that like I kept coming home from school and I wasn't going back to school. And it was like something was breaking loose in me at that time. And my family at the same time got a massive amount of wealth brought into their life. And so they didn't really spend time diagnosing me in any sense of it. My family would not send me to psychologists or counselors or therapists. Like none of that was allowed. None of that was ever allowed. It was a very closed, structured society in my house. And so as like I developed a really close friends group there, my family told me that we were going to be moving to Colorado Springs, Colorado. And so we left the White Mountains and we moved to Colorado Springs, and which is the home to basically 7 military bases or 6 military bases. It is like the epicenter of kind of the military industrial complex and the like religious Christian non-denominational place. Like the president of the Evangelical Association, Ted Haggard, was there with a church called New Life Church. My family started attending this mega church, which is a whole new world. I went from going to a school, a 5A school in the middle of the mountains with cowboys and Indians and Mormons. It was the strangest little world, to private boarding schools with just, or private Christian schools where money and status and clothing was everything. And I just was I was ripe for the picking of bullies and everybody else because I was so insecure. I was so damaged goods in my own perspective of it that I couldn't actually, I didn't have any foundation. I didn't have any feelings of substance in my life. My relational understanding of who I was had been so eviscerated that I was confident more and more that I'm just here to basically be stepped on. And at the same time, I had this self-hatred and self-mutilation. And I became very active in self-mutilation and in cutting myself and torturing myself and self-harming because I was so numb that I was desperate for some kind of visceral feeling, some kind of physical mark on the outside of me that showed just the desperate destruction of who I was. I wanted something out on me that identified me as a ruined waste place. Like I was so unutterably filled with self-hatred. I hated everything about who I was and what I was here for. And at the same time, I had this hope that there was going to come a day where my life had meaning, where the substance of my suffering had a purpose. And yet I was still trapped within the confines of this cowardly system that wouldn't ever let me loose. And so I kind of kept going along and I went to that private Christian school for a couple of years. And then my parents homeschooled me my sophomore year. And that was really when everything took a change. My great-grandfather died, who was like one of my abusers who was living in the home with me. He died. And when he died, that was really when there was this total desecration of my identity. And I came totally undone. And I just started leaving kind of the morality, all the morality that I once held to, the biblical standards that I've been raised with. I wanted to go and feel the world. I wanted to get my hands on life and the life that was being offered through the worldly system. So I started going to a public school after that year of being homeschooled in Manitou Springs, Colorado, and which is like the number one, I guess, concentration of witches in the United States live there. Wicca, or people would maybe perceive themselves as white witches there. But my family planted themselves there just outside of that town, and they had a hospitality industry that they were running there. And so we went from very, very kind of poor to these massive amounts of money and houses. And my dad got a plane, and we got all new cars and private schools and bed and breakfasts. And it was just like money was everywhere. And yet none of it was being allowed to cultivate the talents and the giftings that I had, but it was being kind of funneled towards other projects that my family had their endeavors on. And so I kind of got relegated to the back burner for a season. And then I decided I wanted to pursue a career in the United States military. And so I was going to pursue the United States Air Force Academy, and ended up deciding against that and joined the United States Army. And so as a junior in high school, I got emancipated to the United States government and went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and became a trained murderer, and their standards. And it gave me that, like I talked about earlier, I had a desire to be around men who were men, and people that had convictions. And this world, the society that you're raised in as an American, one of the only outlets they like to show a manly man in is this like religion of sports, and then the religion of the United States military. That's about it. Maybe the police and the fire department, and but that's about it. That's the only place where they allowed the expression of manliness and testosterone and like the warrior spirit to like abide at all. Everywhere else they just crush it out of humans. And so I swallowed that pill hook, line, and sinker, and I was, I had just been to the Twin Towers right before they came down, and so when 9/11 happened, it just kind of was a big catalyst in my life and a lot of people's lives at the time. And so I enlisted in the United States military because I wanted to die a hero's death. If I'm just totally transparent with you, I was on a quest to die as fast as possible. I just wanted to die at the hands of somebody else while saving other people's lives. That was kind of like this mission that I was on in my life, was like, I just want to lay my life down for another brother. It said, there is no greater love than this, than a man lays down his life for his friends. And that was kind of like the driving force. I was like, well, I just want to give up my life so that others can live, And so that became like this motto, was that others may live. I wanted to be somebody that gave themselves up for others. That's what my name means, Nathan. It's giver. I was born to give. And I just wanted to give my life up at that point, and I couldn't. No matter what circumstances I went through, I've had so many horrific injuries throughout my life, like public normal injuries, massive facial reconstructive plastic surgeries. I've had the blood come out of my body. Horrific stuff happened to me all throughout my life, many trips to the ER, and yet I just could not die. I was like this unkillable human. And that's very advantageous if you're in a warrior system. And so I got brought into the United States military and began to volunteer into these special projects groups. And I signed up for every version of gene editing I could get my hands on. I wanted to be a super soldier. I wanted to be an Ubermensch, the Superman. I wanted to be able to carry 300 pounds on my back and be able to run for 20 miles. I had this, like, I was willing to sign up for everything. And so I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and they're in that program. There's a couple guys within there that got a totally different training system than everybody else. And so I was fast tracked in, and I had my own drill sergeants, I had my own DIs, and I had this experience that was just very different than the rest of them. And I was leading the platoon, and I was fast tracked in for like the you're going to be groomed to rise to the top. And I knew that was like my destiny and my mission. And right in the middle of that, I had to get transferred back after I graduated to my senior year in high school. And I kept having these kind of I feel like my transmission was always in and out of gear throughout my life. And so I went back to high school and all the frivolousness that's involved in it. But I just gave myself into every worldly pleasure I could get my hands on at that time. And I found myself getting more and more empty, but more and more hungry for death, more and more hungry for killing, more and more hungry for slaughtering, because there was just that trapped learned helplessness again. I wanted to go be with my unit. I wanted to go be with my teammates. And instead I'm trapped in this classroom with idiots, like by design, not demeaning them. They're designed fools in the classroom, and predominantly the teachers, predominantly the system that that holds them down in that system. And I had enough intellect to find ways to get around it. And so I designed every effort I could to just do as little work as possible, get the best grades as possible, and just cheat my way through the system. And that's what I started putting my intellect towards, and kind of more criminalistic behavior, to just put it frankly, because seeing myself in the working world, I realized every job that I ever went into, I would kind of work my way out of the job so that I could move on to the next thing. And from there, I ended up graduating and going to the University of Colorado at Boulder after another summer with the military. And I studied psychology because I had this deep innate desire to try to heal myself. When I went to Fort Lee, Virginia, for my advanced individual training, I finally got to be a part of the projects and the teams that I thought all my life were the coolest and the baddest and the toughest dudes on the planet, the Night Stalkers, and these guys who were going out and performing covert missions. And I got to go start hunting humans. I wanted to kill bad guys, and I finally got the opportunity to get my hands in there with them. And I got to see at the same time this just same perpetual corruption that had plagued me throughout my life was even more infectious in that system. And it was like the death of my idol, to put it simply. I realized that the thing I'd been pursuing for so many years of my life, that I'd been groomed for and trained for throughout my life, came unglued. And I ended up basically disobeying an order in front of some very powerful people. And it ended it in a moment. You build your whole life to this crescendo of what you think you're like. I'm finally a man. I'm finally a soldier. I'm finally a hero. And some guy in a suit shows up who everyone bows down to, and you don't bow, and he eviscerates your life. And that's what happened for me. I got blacklisted. They have these different kinds of blacklists in the military, and I got put on a blacklist, and they did everything they could to kill me and to eradicate my mind and to throw me into what at the time at Fort Carson, Colorado, where I was stationed, back at my home base. They started doing these treatments for soldiers with MTBIs and TBIs. I started getting a lot of head injuries because people kept smashing my head in trying to kill me. And so they started putting me in these programs to heal soldiers with TBIs. And the way they do that was with a bunch of drugs till they kill themselves. And so this was just one of the worst moments in my life, because it led to, in the same course of time, about a week into it, myself and a great number of my teammates, they killed themselves, and they got put on all of these Ambien and all of these Provigil, a bunch of drugs. Basically, they put us on a bunch of mind altering drugs, and a lot of them killed themselves. And at the same time, I shot and stabbed myself multiple times. And in the course of bleeding to death on the outside of my parents' basement on Thanksgiving morning, I had this vision of my familiar spirit, this covenant keeper of death that I had utilized throughout my life to perform death, to smite the souls of men, to kill people with. And I knew he was coming to harvest my soul. And I saw this man, just a man, step between him and I. And he said, he's mine. You can't have him. And it was just like this overwhelming presence of authority that was so arresting. I had never witnessed authority as I did in that moment. I had seen men act like they were authoritative, but I had never seen total authority, like an absolute dictator, somebody who, when they speak words, law is given out. I had never seen a lawgiver in my life. I had never been around the presence of somebody who spoke with so much authority that everything in creation responded. And it immediately locked away in me an understanding that Yeshua, as I knew him, Jesus, truly was the one who had the authority over every principality, power, ruler, and dominion and authority. Like, he literally actually has the keys over death himself. Like, that was my prince of death that I had been loyal to throughout my life. And he could say a simple phrase to him and it turned him away completely. It annulled a contract, a covenant that I thought was indefeatable. And he did it in a single word. And miraculously, the Father was so merciful to me. I was able to stop the bleeding. I got flight for life to a hospital, and I was able to survive. And however, it became a very big public spectacle, and I was shamed and belittled to hundreds of thousands of people. It was Thanksgiving morning, so it was very big news. And this was kind of the setup for me to be mocked the rest of my life, to destroy, character assassinate me any other time in my life. They couldn't get me on. I wouldn't have sex with children. I wouldn't corrupt myself in a lot of these other ways that a lot of other people would. But for me, that was it. Let's shame him. And so that's what happened. I lost all of my friends. I lost the vast majority of my family. I lost so much in my life at that point. And I was just kind of this fragile person. I got honorably discharged from the United States military. I was just left this empty shell of a man. And they put me on 17 different medications. And they're like, you're going to fix you now. And I stopped taking them. I started going to a church in Lafayette, Colorado, that was called Flatirons Community Church. And they had a program there that was called Shift. And it was for the like wounded ones, is what they kind of would say, people that were struggling and hurting. And I began to find acceptance within this community, and it kind of began to give me this harbor of peace, this harbor of love. And it was into that time in my life that I ended up meeting who would become my wife, Chelsea. And it was really the catalyst that began this great undoing of death and despair and hopelessness, and a restoration process began right there when I met her. And that's why I start my book in that moment where I meet Chelsea, because for me, she became this safe harbor. It's literally what her name means. Like, your names have such meaning. And I encourage you to study and understand your names. It's not just like the one your parents gave you. Like, you have a name and an identity that is so intimately tied with your purpose in this life right now, that's indestructible. Like, it matters tremendously. And she came into my life and provided for me the first foundational safe harbor that I'd ever experienced. And we dated and we got married, and she got to know me as this very happy ministry person. I was being put on the stages there and sharing my testimonies. And the Father's gifted me with a talent for speaking in churches, and wherever I go, people want to put me on the stage. They want me to do the Nate show or whatever. They want me to just go and make their company, their product, whatever it is. They want to make it famous. They'll throw me out there. And so I was right in the middle of that world at the fastest growing college ministry in the country. And it was this really exciting time to be together. But then over the course of that, family members came back into my life and started trying to drag me back into that other kingdom. And it was halfway into my marriage that I became a totally different person at the time. It was about 2.5 years into our marriage then. And I went from being Nate to this whole other version that my wife didn't understand. She didn't recognize. I shaved my hair off. I started wearing guns and body armor. And I started going out and burying stuff in the woods and stalking pedophiles and trying to do intelligence gathering operations in Boulder, Colorado against the prostitutes and the pimps and the politicians that were there and the judges. And it was just like automatic. It was like as easy as breathing. And my wife and I's marriage just dissolved. It just began to come apart completely. And into that time, about 5 years in, she got pregnant, and I had been physically castrated, like no all intents and purposes. I'd had surgeries performed, and I should not be able to have children, and we had not been able to conceive for a long time. And so then when she did conceive, I knew I have a child that has made me, that is destined for me to be a father. The Father has created me for life and not death. And that was the moment where everything turned, was right then.
Wow. There's so much to unpack with all of this. It's amazing just how many lifetimes somebody like you lives in your own lifetime, and you're so young, and it's like you've lived 100 lifetimes just in your short life, and understanding just the vastness of how planned this is, that really, before you're even here, they have these pathways that are potentially set for you. And then they seek talents that they can exploit of yours to go on a path, like you said, that's not your holy destined path that you were born with as a child of God. It's a path that's inverted, that they can then take those beautiful gifts that God gives you and turn them inside out and use them for nefarious purposes. So I know that you were the firstborn son, so obviously that's significant. How did they choose, or what was it about you that got you into this pathway that they put you in? What were the talents that they found, and why were you chosen to go into these assassination, Delta programs versus maybe another pathway?
I have a form of memory retention that's very vivid. It's not eidetic. Eidetic is people that say they can look at something and remember it forever. They can look through a book and remember everything they've read. It's much less common, but I have a form of memory retention that allows me to see things and retain information in a really fast way. And when I see something, experience something, I can mimic it. I can iterate it really quickly. And so anytime, basically, the grooming procedures that take place in families like this it's like a finder's program is the best way to elucidate it. And any of you, I encourage you, go look up the finder's programs that have been brought to light over the past few generations, and whether it's in the Boy Scouts, or whether it's within a Freemasonic organization, or whether it's in a corporate structure, or whether it's in the Salvation Army, there are Red Cross, or like the Peace Corps. There's so many different finders programs that are out there that are talent scouts, people that are looking for particular kinds of aptitudes and talents within children or within teenagers and adults that are trying to recruit people into this broader family, this great family, or this great network that has so readily built up this society. But my proclivities and my talents really got expressed early on when my mom rented a VHS tape at the library of like a martial artist. It was the first time I ever watched like a martial arts thing. My mom was homeschooling us at the time with my two older sisters and a variety of other children. And she went to the library and got this book, and they started showing all these different throws and these different roles. And that night when my dad came home, I performed those like immediately. And so as soon as these kind of aptitudes towards martial arts began to be expressed, it was like I got brought right into these little training circles for like Filipino martial arts predominantly, and Salat and like short people arts, and there's no other way to say it. Like there's specific kinds of martial arts that are geared towards women and towards children. And so that's who I ended up kind of getting brought into that for. The other big aptitude that I had was specific markings on my body at the time of my birth and my youth, and or when I was very, very angry or upset, that would express themselves. And they believed they were the mark of Cain. They held a tradition that there are harbingers of people that carry the mark of Cain still physically, bodily on the earth. And whenever that's identified, they get just brought in. And so though on paper, I may be the firstborn son of my father, there is a great fogginess surrounding all the areas of parenthood and heraldry and a lot of that stuff on my side of the family. And that's part of the catalyst that led to people trying to kill my wife and I was later when I was 27 and trying to identify a lot of my genealogy and a lot of my heraldry. that led to people coming out and trying to kill my wife, who was pregnant with my daughter Naomi at the time. So those were some of the talents in particular that I was expressing that made me desirable, maybe more so than just somebody else. They realized I could be a good records keeper mentally and internally for people's secrets and blackmail, and that my aptitudes for communicating and talking with people could make me, I could pose myself as a different age person anywhere I went. I could get along with somebody that was 50 just as easy as a 5-year-old. And so they began to train me and groom me towards being able to be an extortioner and a blackmailer within the family.
For people listening who may not fully understand the importance of why they would choose children for this, what are your insights on that? Why wouldn't they just use, say, the military that we already have, or people that are, a little bit older? Like, what's the significance of choosing this so young and then getting these programs, doing military programming as a child, and just instilling that grooming in somebody so young? How would you explain that to people?
Children have been used as soldiers from the antiquity of time, and it's only in modernity that we have had an artificial extension of adolescence, and that came by design through the systemic dumbing down of our society through the education system. Children have not been children like we think of as today, except in modernity in our culture. You go all over the world. I went to Afghanistan just before my wife and I began to date, and I got to see what people call children working, laboring, serving their families, diligently providing what they need. I saw shepherd boys. Okay, let me just say that was the thing that just like blew my mind and changed me forever to understand how the rest of the world views children, and they have the right attitude and perspective of them. They train them up as if they're humans and adults, not just some kind of infantile thing that needs to be shoved in a junk drawer called a classroom for the rest of their life. And they did not raise their children to be stupid. They raised them to be competent and capable. And it enabled them to be participants in the society just as much as an adult, because a 12-year-old boy is exceedingly capable of doing incredible acts of heroics and physical merit and strength, way more than a guy who's 45 in a lot of ways. And so they don't waste that. Like, part of the understanding that our society, the mass society, does not get raised up with, they don't get access to maybe the knowledge base, is to look at their children as intentionally hardwired, built to learn immediately. They are able to do and grow and understand instantly from when they're born in the womb, right? They understand life begins at conception. Like, they actually believe that. Now, they might have agendas that try to dissuade people and convince them to chemically castrate and kill their babies immediately for the idols of or for the fear of men or the fear of lack or their careers or whatever else they sacrifice their children to. They have an understanding that you should train your children up immediately. As soon as they express talents, you provide for them the ability to express those talents in a way that fulfills the family's needs. And so when I was 27, what began to really unravel with so much of this was those missing pieces began to really come into grips. I began to hear people like Russ Dizdar, like I shared earlier, who was speaking all these secrets about mind control. He wrote a book called The Black Awakening, which is now $2,000 on Amazon because they're trying to price restrict it so that people don't have access to this information. But it was the rise of the satanic super soldier. And he, in that, was dismantling these assassins. He was dismantling these child assassins and how these mind control operations were profiteering off of child exploitation. And as my wife and I, we ended up going to a conference in, I think, 2014 down. It was called Prophecy in the News Conference in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I wanted to hear Russ Dizdar speak. I had seen him on YouTube and online for so long, and I wanted to see him in person, like see he's a real living human being, and he's not dead. That was just like this. He was just his living witness, man. He's a living stone. You're like, you can't kill a stone. They're really hard to kill. And he was like that. He was this guy who's just like, he was ferocious. And he was standing on the stage and he was talking about all these witches that were in the room right now. And they're going to be doing curses and all this stuff. And he was like, I'm not afraid. Like, because like he just had this boldness to just call everybody out in the room and all their agendas that were taking place. And that these people are here to curse me. They're here to curse you. They're here to add confusion. And my wife at the time was sitting there like, oh my gosh, because for her, she did not come from this world. She didn't come from this background at all. She also had not watched a lot of Russ Dizdar. I was like all into this stuff for years. And I was like closet style. It's like when some of you guys wake up to these conspiracies and you never tell a soul. You're like, I'm not telling anybody. I don't want them to know I know. You're like scared. You're like, I don't want them to know my search history. I don't know. You're trying to go through all these links. And you're like, I don't want anybody to know it. I was like that then. I was like, I never had a YouTube that I logged into. I was like using Tor and I was like going all through the dark web to try to look at this. Oh, it's just so ridiculous. But it's just fear, you know, it's just fear. We got a culture of fear in our society, and fear is a sin. And we got it. Literally, you have to murder it out of your life. You have to strangle it and hold it under the water until it dies. And then when it comes back from the dead, you just got to crucify it again. And when it comes back, you got to beat it to death. That's fear in our society. And instead, they've engineered a society that just fuels fear. They play on our irrationality instead of raising a society of rational humans. They've trained us to be irrational, and then they profit off of that. But she was in this room, and it was called, I think the title of his talk was called The Satanic Infiltration of the Church. And Chelsea saw the title and was like, I do not want to go to that. And I was like, that's why we should go. That's why we should go. And in that conference talk, he was talking about these witches that were active in the room. And he talked about the assassins that are in the room. And he's like, they'll have blades strapped to their chest. And Chelsea like looked over at me, and she reached over and touched my chest. And I was like, had knives strapped to my body. And she was like, what? And it was like, for her, there was like the realization began to happen to her so fast right there in that room. And for me, I was just like this, just overwhelming. Like I could have cried with relief because somebody had seen my identity. Somebody had witnessed me and not been afraid and not run away and not shamed me. Somebody had identified me in a crowd, had spotted me. And I was happy about it. All the rest of my life, it was like, be background noise. Don't let anybody see you. Like just pop in and pop out. Just like I'd been so trained in these grade protocols for so long that like suddenly it was like there was a spotlight on me, and it was like peace. And I was like, this is the greatest thing I've ever known. My wife has connected with a part of my identity, and she's not left the room yet. Now, she did leave the room soon after, but she went to the bathroom, and in the bathroom, she goes to the bathroom, and these ladies in there, so ridiculous. She goes to the bathroom, she goes to the sink, and there's this woman who's standing at the sink. She's got it like full of, like clogged it and full of water, and she's doing like these sigils and curses in like the soap and the smoke, and the fog. She's watching this lady, and she's like, oh my gosh. She's like, it's totally real. And she like goes over to the sink, and the woman looks over at her, and she goes, this is, and she's like, oh my, she's like rebuking the lady in her brain. She's all like rebuking her. She's like, it's going down, man. She came back, and it was like, oh my gosh. So for her, it was like the paradigm was erupted out of her. Like she realized that this stuff is active, it's taking place, and I'm pretty sure my husband is this. And now what? Like now what? He was describing runners and all the rest of us. And I had a job at that time. I went into mental health because obviously I wanted to understand what was wrong. I went into philosophy and mental health because I wanted to be able to clearly communicate, and I wanted to be able to comprehend how to fix the soul, because I recognized my soul was damaged. And that's what psychologists are. They're soul workers. And at the same time, they deny soul exists. It's a really complex world full of all kinds of contradictions, but we got to find the truth. And so at that same exact window of time, she started having this understanding that there was something about her husband that she needed to understand. And I started recognizing that she didn't run away when she saw me. Like all my life, I'd been trained basically, when you're identified, it will lead to, well, not my death, because I couldn't die. Like I didn't have any fear of death, because every time I'd faced death, I'd lived. Every time I'd faced death, I'd conquered it. And so I didn't have any fear of death, but I had a fear of people rejecting me. I had a fear of men and a fear of women. And there was only one person in the entire world at that point that I actually cared would leave me, and that was her. And I had so many lies spoken over me throughout my life that, like, if you tell anybody, they're going to leave you. If you tell anybody, and so many of you don't understand this, if you talk about this stuff, we're going to come out in all this other lies. Satan is a liar. He's the father of lies, y'all. And all these people can do is stand on their lies. And when they're confronted, they just lie more. Like the only way they can build up their kingdom is with more lies, more deceit. Like just double down. Like, and if you tell a lie, like they believe, like Goebbels and these people that were the propagandists for the Nazis in the early 1930s, 1940s, like the people that engineered a society that was willing to shoot babies in the head and slaughter millions of people. Like they engineered that society generations beforehand. And they did that through eugenics programs and through people's a religious ideology that infected the nation of basically Darwinian evolution, but a scientific dogma of the favored races. Like, don't ever forget, Darwin's book was all about race warfare. And people like to hold fast to Darwinian evolution. At the same time, they've neutered his book's title because he was all about the favored races, the evolution of the favored races. But that ideology gave them a scientific validation for what people used to call the divine right of kings to rule. And that gave them the power to just slaughter masses or rule over them, do anything they wanted to them. Now they had a scientific reason to say, yeah, we're literally the strongest are going to survive. And because you're so stupid, you don't read our books, our writings, and apply them, we have the right to overpower you and kill you. That same very man, basically, they purported that if you tell a lie long enough and over enough, people will begin to believe it. Just keep saying the lie, keep saying the lie. And they would do it. This is the doctrines of Balaam, like you read about in the scriptures. Read the book of Numbers, chapters 22 through 25. Read the book of Revelation. You'll see these doctrines of Balaam, people that want the wages of unrighteousness that come along as the counselors of kings. To help the kings shore up their power, they show them how to do this old religion, to do this great magical working against people, to use sorcery, divination, passing their children through the fires of Moloch. This all began to kind of just blow itself apart when I realized that it was a lie, and love was far more powerful than fear. And I was like, oh man, maybe I could know love. Maybe I could experience love. Maybe my wife and I could love each other again. Because up until that point, there was basically mutual animosity. I basically resented her because I was not able to be a lone wolf and go out and hunt and slaughter all these bad guys I was identifying. And because I had a name, I had a physical address, I had all this other stuff, a job. I wanted to disappear back into the ether like I came from and be able to come out and hunt these people. And I had this resentment towards her. And I wanted to be free of that, but I didn't know how to get free of it. And love was truly the catalyst that launched that. And so she began to see and identify me as something other than just this Christian guy I married who, went to psychology. And I started working with adjudicated youth and people that had severe sexual traumas throughout their life. I became an assistant supervisor of a semi-locked residential facility for 6-year-olds to 18-year-olds that had been either victims of trauma and sexual abuse or perpetrators themselves. And oftentimes there was both in there, highly sexualized children who were trying to get healing. And it was in that very same facility, they had all these runners. They would call them runners when children would just get into this panic, this fear mode, and they would just run as fast as they could. And at that time, when I was working there, I could catch every child or every adult that ran. I could catch them all. It was like I had the runner and I would go after him, and everyone called me the runner. And she was looking over at me as Russ Dizdar was in there, and he's describing runners. He's describing these assassins, and he's describing all this stuff. And she's like, this guy is reading my husband's resume. And it was disturbing to her. But at the same time, she lacked a category for understanding. And this is where I think a lot of spouses or a lot of singletons, people that are of a single mind, people that have been raised outside of the society, this is where the bridge has been exploded. This is where there has been a designed deceit to keep people from understanding and crossing over that threshold to understand that, yes, this is a systemic, scientific methodology that's been taking place for generations to destroy the human soul, to radically pervert and corrupt a child. And so that their identity is so destroyed, they can never do anything other than what the guiding puppeteering hands say. And she didn't still have that full comprehension and understanding, but she was willing to stay. She was willing to persevere. She was willing to abide. And so when she conceived Naomi and I began to come unglued, I'll just put it super transparently. I knew that if I did not do everything I could to get healing as fast as humanly possible before that child was born, my daughter was going to go, or my child was going to go straight through it. We knew we were going to have a girl. Her and I had dreams our whole life that we were going to have a little girl. And we knew that her name was going to be Naomi. We were like, that's our daughter, Naomi. But for me, I was like, if I don't do everything I can to utterly destroy this, it is going to capture and consume another generation. And we ended up going to a conference down in Dallas called Hear the Watchman, and Russ Dizdar was speaking again. And he called people up for prayer, and a man named Tom Dunn came and he prayed for me when I was just lying on my face. And during that prayer, the Father used him to help root this amnesic tree out of me. And it was like the floodgates of understanding came pouring in, and I became undone. Everything that had been placed there demonically and spiritually and physically and technologically just began to come out of me. I began to ooze black goo out of my feet. I began to have all these bodily injuries that I'd had throughout my life begin to express themselves again, bruises showing up, like all these abreactions began to happen physically on my body as I was remembering all these things. It was just like I was thrown into the blender that any of you who survivors understand, or families of survivors have seen, where they fall apart, and that's super awkward when you're still an adult and you're still just trying to live a life and you're still trying to work a job. And I, at the same time, had that fire in me to persevere. I had a desire in me for my daughter to have freedom that just kept me going, that I had to get healed. And so I started looking into every version of counseling and healing I could get my hands on, but all secretly because I hadn't told Chelsea. And so it really wasn't until the moment came where I finally told her that I got to experience what true love can be. When I told her who I was, when I told her what my family was a part of, when I told her all of these things that I had done, and I became vulnerable at a level that I never had with any other person in the history of my life. And she stayed with me. We sat on our front porch, and I turned into a 5-year-old, screaming, crying, blubbering, mess. And at the same time, for her, it was the biggest wave of relief, because she understood. She finally had that bridge of her confusion that had been so impossible for her to walk over was finally rebuilt. And it was built through vulnerability. It was built through me being willing to lose everything. And she continued to persistently love me amidst those circumstances. But for her, it also finally helped her understand what the heck was going on, because she was a discerner of people, and she always had these horrifically creeped out vibes with my grandfather. And there's some seriously disturbing things that were happening around me, like that my family would make everybody do these little child plays and stuff. And she was like, there's some perverse, weird things that are going on here, but I don't know what's going on. So for her, she was greatly relieved, but and then angry. She was so mad. She was so mad. And my wife is like, if you guys watch our channel and our video for years, like, people don't see Chelsea as angry like ever. They're like, she's just this like, oh, she's so loving and sweet and all the rest.
She's a
Yeah,
bright light.
but she is like, got this like, y'all, my wife can burn the earth down with her mouth. I'll tell you what, man, there ain't nothing like a woman's love and her tender, loving care towards her children. And it's a real stinking thing, man. When you cross that, man, you're going to get your head ripped to pieces. She's going to peel your skin off your flesh with the words of her mouth. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's defending me. Like, she's defending me. She became an advocate as opposed to an adversary. And so at the same process of my healing, she was willing to abide with me and stick with me. Like, she like literally was like, I still meant the words of my vow when I spoke them to you when we got married. Even though that wasn't you, it's still you. Like, I still love you. I still care for you, and we are still in this together. And she was, I think, right around maybe 7 months pregnant. It was almost exactly 7 years ago at this point. And so I went back to my family, which is crazy. I don't necessarily recommend this, y'all. I'll just say this real clear. On the other side, looking past on all this stuff, I don't know. This is one of those decisions that you wrestle with when you're not in that like total kind of panicky, fearful state. But I had this passionate love for them. I began to like get healing for these areas of my life. I began to kind of deal with the dissociation and deal with the trauma pockets and start getting healing into these different physical areas of my brain. And I started having like relief. And then I started having this like innate desire to see them set free. Like I have a hunger for people to be set free. I literally believe the words that are in the scriptures that said like Yeshua came to set the captives free. I have never left that my entire life. He came to heal the broken heart, to bind up the brokenhearted, to set captives free, like to proclaim liberty, like freedom to the slaves. Like, this is like, that has never left me my entire life. And that means that's my job. That is my job for the rest of my life, is to preach that to everybody. Everywhere I go, I'm supposed to say that to every creature. Like, you can know healing and peace. And I believed it, and I stuck with it. And I was like, I know the cure for bitterness, wrath, hatred, like anger and murder was forgiveness. I knew it was forgiveness and ultimately love for my enemies. And so in order to go from, hey, how about I just go and kill all of these people, to, hey, how about I go and forgive all of these people? It took a good long time, but I got to a place where I wanted to go back to them and tell them I forgive them, tell them like, I remember all these things. And yet amidst them, I want you to know I forgive you and I love you, and you can have healing and restoration. And this is how I have found healing and restoration. And that was when I realized that my family was still totally caught up in it, that my family was still active players in the game, that I had been out of it for a few years, but they were still heavily seated in. They doubled down. And they tried to eviscerate me. They went to every friend group that I had, all of my jobs. Like, my dad literally went down when I first started speaking out publicly on this. He used to comment hundreds of times on my videos. And he had the other handler, the military guy, Richard, which is all over all of my videos. It was insane. I started trying to talk to these people about it, but they tried to bury the secrets even more, which just kind of fueled me honestly, in my pursuit. When I find corruption and or anything else, and somebody tries to stifle it, man, it's just like fuel in the fire. Like, let's just keep going. Like, you guys who want to keep these things secret are going to lose. I've read it. He says everything they've done in secret is going to be shouted. Everything they've done in secret is going to be proclaimed on the rooftops. Like, there ain't no hiding from his eyes. He sees all their deeds. His eyes are in all the earth, and they say these things in secret. Like, who sees it? They just because you go underground in a tunnel, you think he can't see you. Just because you go down in your bunker, in your bridge, you think he can't see you. Like, it's just such naivety. It's such blindness. That's this searing of the mind that's taking place in them. But it fueled me. It was just this insatiable fuel for me to keep going. And so I started sharing it with everyone. It was like, some of you all survivors, you get set free and you're like, I'm telling the world. Now, I didn't have a YouTube platform or any of that stuff. I wasn't going to tell the world, but I told everybody I could get my hands on. But to most other people, then I was just insane, right? And it's true. You're pretty crazy. Still pretty crazy. It's fantastic. It's fun. Be crazy. It's good for you. And it was in that time where I realized, hey, like, they really can make you lose your job. They really can make you lose all your finances. They really can do a lot of these things. But you know what? Praise yeah. It was the best thing that could have happened to my wife and I, because you know what I got? I got purchased my time back. I got time. So, like, my wife, she had a successful nursing career that she hated just perpetually because of the systems of care and the systems of slavery that she was in bondage to, like systems of destruction of the human body. And she's like, I want to heal people, and I don't want to keep poisoning them and killing them. This is so broken. And so when she gave birth to Naomi, she stopped working, and then we're both working. We're around each other all the time, and I'm just like coming unglued because now I'm hearing crying babies, and I was like, it's just crazy. It was nuts. We started having people still kept trying to kill us, and it wasn't working. And we were just like in this bizarre little world in a neighborhood where people were leaving chunks of human flesh in our yard. People were coming and cursing us, and it went so crazy so fast. And we were just kind of stuck in the midst of this whirlwind happening all around us. And we knew we wanted out. We wanted freedom. We wanted healing. We wanted restoration, but we had no idea how to do that. And we were firmly planted in the heart of darkness in a neighborhood called Countryside, Westminster. And they were actively slaughtering a girl named Jessica Ridgway. There was active coven members who were butchering babies and children in that neighborhood. Public news. And we were like trapped right in the middle of it. And we were like going out and prayer walking. We're taking Russ Dizdar. He had this like spiritual intercession prayer manual, and where you go out and prayer map where all the territory, where all this stuff is going on. And we were just, we were at it, man. We were on to these people. We were hunting them down, and we were just interceding for them. We were just asking the Father to forgive the sins that were empowering this veil of secrecy everywhere. And we just wanted to see the captives set free everywhere we went. And so it was really in the course of that time that I decided it was like the Father was calling me to share my testimony, to reach out to Tom Dunnigan and let him know that what happened after that prayer, and let him know that there was a family that was alive because that man was willing to weigh down into this filthy mire and pray with brothers and sisters who were so broken. It was because people were willing to lay down their lives that there was sons and daughters who were raised up without it. Like, my grandfather never touched Naomi. Praise yeah. They flew up to Arizona, from Arizona to Colorado, to try to get to the birth. And man, there was a guy who is worth 30 men, armed cadre, guarding her at the birth center when she was born. Like, nobody got to touch her. Praise be to the Father for that. And like it was like everything was finally set up for us to go on a journey of understanding.
What a story. I love your love story, and it's so inspiring. There's a couple other married couples that I know where the memories surface during marriage. I don't hear of it often, but you really do see how powerful it is to have that validation from another person that you love, and to hear those words like, I love all of you, like, I love every part of you, and like, I accept you. And I just love that, she wasn't intimidated by it. It shows the strength of her spirit too, that she, despite her past and not having come in contact with this, that she was so open-minded, and that her heart was, thrown into the abyss of love, per se, to, accept you for who you were and not run away from it. Cause that's what people do. Unfortunately, we see it everywhere in society. I even get, and I understand this stuff's hard to listen to, but it's discouraging even as a content creator when I see a comment on my YouTube of, oh, I had to turn it off, it's too much for me. And it's like, I get it. Some of these details are hard. And I try not to go into too much detail all the time. Not everybody needs to understand all the details to understand, the big picture. That's more important. But it's like, gosh, we didn't have to live it, and how powerful it is, in our worst moments. If we think about, if we have somebody pass away in our lives, or if we have a bad breakup, like all that stuff's very traumatic, and I ask people to think about, what if everybody in your life just abandoned you and was like, oh, you had a bad breakup and your heart's broken? Well, good for you. Go figure it out. You're crazy. You're acting crazy. It's like, gosh, how lonely and isolating that space is, when all we want to do is be heard, and all we want to do is feel that compassion of somebody loving, that is willing to look into that darkness with us. When she, or I should say, when you first started remembering, what was her initial reaction? Did she at any point not believe you, or was she so on board like the whole time, as you were first coming to terms with these memories surfacing?
That's a great question. I can't say that she believed everything I was saying. I'll just be real transparent with you. It was a lot, y'all. And it's funny because you have two sides of that equation. You got me only telling her like this much. It's like probing. I'm gonna tell you this much and see if you can handle that. She was really able to see and identify clearly that these other parts of my soul, like littles within me, she had seen these kinds of things going on. And for her, there was stuff that was very easy to understand, that like, yes, this is totally what's been going on. There was also a book that was very helpful for us that I don't know if I've really mentioned it much, but it was called The ABCs of DID. And it was like a PDF, and I'm sure it's still available today. It was put out by a ministry in South Africa, and it was predominantly, I think, written for counselors or pastors and people that are like in ministry fields that were encountering survivors, and that they're like, I don't know what the heck this stuff is. Like most pastors in seminary, they're never told anything about what the Bible says, unfortunately, in regards to all of this, because this stuff has been going on forever, y'all. And the Father didn't leave us without understanding. He loved us so much that he gave us this living word and this testimony. And like you were just even talking about a moment ago, people that say in the comments, I just had to turn it off, it was just too much for me, all the rest of that, it's because like even great Christian people that are lovers of the word, our Bibles have been so diminished from some of the capacity of information that used to be there. Like if you go back to the 1611 King James Bible, there's all these other books that were in there. Like one of those is the Maccabees, these books of the Maccabees, which was the time after Malachi, and where there was this abomination of desecration. King Antiochus, the Greeks came in and took over Jerusalem, and they started going into the temple and desecrating it and convincing everyone to eat pork and slaughter their children and do all of these horrible things. During the course of those events, if you read those books that used to be in our scriptures, there are such detailed accounts of the most horrific satanic ritual abuse and torture, like graphic details of torture that you read about in the book of Hebrews. Like it talks about these heroes of faith who were sawn in two, who were torn asunder. Like you're like, where are all these accounts? They're in these other books that had been in our scriptures, that had always been in our scriptures, that were then ripped out because they showed, they validated, they endorsed what radical intelligent evil looks like when it puts on human flesh and skin suits and begins to exercise its dominion and its authority against the sons and daughters of righteousness. Like you see people that were willing to have their flesh torn apart from their bodies, mothers that witnessed their 7 sons being brutally tortured and admonishing them to keep the commandments of the Father, to not turn away from the instructions that you'd given them and imparted to them, to not defile themselves, like to be brave. Like you see these accounts of men who are brave and women who were brave and who are willing to stand up in the face of insurmountable odds and lose everything and not give in to the commandments of liars, like Moses' mother and father, who were like, they feared the Father more than they feared the sovereign's commands, the king's commands. So they're like, you know what? Better to not slaughter my own son and to entrust him to the Father. Like there's these amazing accounts in the scriptures, but so many people won't even look at it. Like you said, they turn away from it. And I had to go into detail at times with Chelsea and say things to her that were so horrific. Like you guys think you hear some stuff because you watch survivors accounts on YouTube. Like you have no comprehension of the level of visceral feeling of what it's like to sit in the room with another human being who comes completely unglued and shares with you vivid details of something so egregious as to watching children being being consumed by their own parents. Like you can't even comprehend what that's like, because you think you experience it through these black mirrors that we're communicating with. You don't understand what it feels like physically feels like to be in the presence of somebody like this. And so it's easier to insulate yourself with distance and to dismiss, to be like, I'm not going to even accept that as truth, rather than to just weigh into it for a minute and sit there and abide with somebody who's coming undone, like somebody who's just coming out of a car accident, and they're frantic, and they're confusing, and they don't talk right. And you're like, yeah, because they're going through something bodily and mentally that is so beyond their capacity to communicate. But she was willing to sit there and at least stay with me. And she didn't understand it. She didn't quite comprehend what was going on. And the complexities as I shared more and more with her, and she didn't reject me, as I shared more and more of what was actually happening and more what had happened, and I began to pull out like the military records, and I began to pull out like the picture albums, and I began to show her some of these witnesses, it began to help her understand, okay, this definitely happened to my husband, but I don't totally get everything that happened. I don't understand it. It's not that she necessarily believed it either all the way, but she didn't reject it, and she didn't mock me or belittle me. However, we are promised that people are going to mock us. We're promised that people are going to treat us like this, because we designed a system that socially engineered us to put the outliers back into the herd. Like we were raised in schools that taught us, if you're the outlier, you go do whatever you got to do to socially eradicate that person until they come back into the fold. Like people have been trained to do that. It's not innate. It's not like this in other societies and cultures. This was by design. They knew the witnesses are coming forward. Like, can I just read something really quick? It's Isaiah 65.
Please.
Like there's these prophecies, y'all, about survivors that they're going to come out in the last days, and they are literally to be the witnesses to the nations. Like you were born to go and share your testimony to the nations. It's literally what you're here for. If you've survived, I know a lot of them didn't. Like I know a lot of brothers and sisters that died. I know lots of them just gave up. I know they quit. I would have. I wanted to die so much. I wanted to die. But you know what? I was preserved. And if you're alive and you're hearing this today, I don't care if you're 80 years old or you're 8 years old, like you have to be willing to lay your life down and speak the truth. Speak the truth no matter what it costs you, because in a society of deception, the telling the truth is a truly dangerous thing. But that's awesome. We should be excited to step into danger. We should be eager to embrace dangerous situations, because you know what? It's more dangerous for you to get in the car and drive to the store than it is for you to speak the truth. It is inherently, statistically. They can't kill us all, y'all. There's tens of millions of us, and there's more every single day. But you know what's so beautiful is we outnumber them on such an impossibly high numerical order that they are terrified of us every single day of their life. There's a reason that kings go to sleep and tremble, because you know what? The Father can send a dream to Pharaoh in a night, or Nebuchadnezzar in a night, or Nimrod in a night that dismantles them completely. And he does that all the time. He will send them dreams and visions of their destruction. And you know what? It's inevitable. It's unstoppable, because the word of Yahweh can never be broken. And so when he sends these judgments against them, they know the day of Yahweh is unavoidable, and they're going to try to see the mountains themselves to cover them. They're trying to bury themselves in and insulate themselves from the impending doom. They're living in bondage. And so if you stand there as a witness, as the person who goes about in sheep's clothing, as a deranged idiot in the woods, your confidence in your convictions is so compelling to people that you know what? They can't fight against it, because they have no confidence to stand on. They don't have any sure footing. They are living in mire and muck that is so deep that they are like quadriplegics trying to climb their way to the top of a mountain, and they're using nothing but their lying lips to get themselves there. But you know what? When you have the firm foundations of the living words of truth building you up from the inside, it makes you so terrifying to the people who are the tormentors of men and women and children that they flee at your presence. When I confronted my father, when I confronted my family members, like there was this crazy, ridiculous showdown that ended up taking place the last time I talked to my father. I don't even know if I wrote about it in the book, but it was like I went to go talk to my closest sister. I was going to meet her at a park that was like about halfway between her and I in Golden, Colorado. And I didn't tell anybody else, but her, Chelsea, and I went, and she had a bunch of children. So we met at a splash pad, place where little children run around in chemically treated water, and they play and they think it's fun. They forget that creeks exist. They're amazing, y'all. Go to the creeks, get out of the pools that poison your soul. Anyways, check this out. She was like, Chelsea went with me because I was a little fragile, full disclosure, super fragile, mostly unstable, but still a little bit rooted in reality. And it was good. And I just wanted to talk to my sister. I wanted her to hear it from my lips. I wanted her to physically sit in front of me and be able to hear my testimony. And I got there and I literally started to talk to her. And all of a sudden my dad showed up. And it was like, it was a war that I've been waiting my whole life for, like an opportunity to confront somebody. It's like I know some survivors, they just want their abusers are dead and they wanted that opportunity to sit down and just get after them, you know? And I had never in my life felt the power of what they call the Holy Spirit, like the spirit of truth that leads you to remember all the things that they said. Like if you read this book, it's a living book that comes into you and it changes you. And like those words can be drawn upon for the rest of your life. Like they really can be with you the rest of your life. And my dad raised me in a Christian home. My dad did everything he can, I think, to try to raise me on one side as a man of God, as a man of belief, as a man who cared about the truth. And at the same time, there was another half of my dad that was so deeply in debt to the Prince of Darkness that he could not get out of it, and it wouldn't let him out. And I got to lay out in front of him what had taken place, and that I was not going to stand there and be silent, because my dad made me promise him when I confessed all these things to him, he believed it, he validated it, he had agreed with it in private. And he said, whatever, you can tell anybody you want, don't you dare tell your sisters. And he just kept saying that to me. And Chelsea was always like, why? That's so weird. And he just didn't want me to tell my sisters, no matter what. He didn't care who I told. Just don't tell your sisters. But then he showed up there because I was telling my sisters, and he was just so enraged. And there was a presence that came on him when I was rebuking him for failing to be a father, to failing to guard his children, failing to do these things. Like, I told him that I didn't know why, but when this other presence came on him and he was cursing and screaming, and my dad had never in my life, he never cussed. He never screamed. He never displayed anger. And he was enraged. And there's all these little children running around playing at the splash pad. And here's this like fully demonized guy screaming and cussing at the top of his lungs. And like this couple just sitting there in front of him. But I had told him that the mantle of authority of headship that he had over the Reynolds family had been revoked. And he went nuts. This other spirit came over him and he was speaking with icy words, but he rose up and was screaming curses at me and screaming all these specific mind control triggers of like, you're going to go crazy, you're going to do this and that and this, and you're going to lose your marriage, and she's going to divorce you. I mean, all these horrible curses, like the last things a father could say to his son, every curse he could possibly come up with. But it's not him. It's what's consuming him. The generational principality that's been governing the Reynolds family for all these years. The great dragon that has been ruling this dynastic bloodline of despair was losing his seat of authority, right? He was being revoked. And he was literally running away from me, like I was a gunman, and all I was using was the sword in my mouth. And I saw him run in terror, get in his car and just peel out of there. And Chelsea was sitting there like, what is going on? She was like, oh my gosh, because she'd never seen any of that stuff in my dad. My dad had always been like my best friend, the good guy, the happy guy. And then it was just like in front of all these people. And she's like, this is crazy. And then he called and was trying to convince me to go tell specifically these specific police officers in Lake Havasu City. I want you to file specific reports in Lake Havasu City, Arizona. And I recorded all these calls and these conversations at the time when I was meeting with my family. And because they still, the brotherhood of the family is still very, very active down there. And he was wanting to set me up for all these other things. But I got to see and witness what can happen in that moment of when ultimate evil confronts truth. And you know what? Evil always flees. Evil always sees. It says, humble yourselves, therefore, before the mighty face of Yahweh, and resist the devil, and he will flee from you. And I got to see that. I got to see what it's like to see the devil flee at the presence of truth. Like, yeah, Yeshua has this ultimate showdown after 40 days of fasting, totally exhausted and hungry. They're like, and he was hungry after 40 days. I'm like, the greatest understatement in the entire Bible. And he's like, just turn these stones to bread and you can eat some of it. And he's all like rebuking him with the word, like short, synoptic, just precise Cliff Notes versions of Deuteronomy, of the Torah, and like the scripture. You're like, dude was just assassinating him. And he fled. It literally says he fled from him, looking for a more opportune time. And the reason he's like this is because he's compared to a lion, y'all. And I've been studying lions my whole life. I love them. My life dream is to wrestle lions. I love it. I go into their caves and dens. I want to get my hands on lions. They're the embodiment of these adversaries and these incredible creatures and these royalty that we see. But like there's a reason a lion, like mountain lions in particular, when they ambush things, they jump on their backs, they go for the throat, they try to kill them and pierce their skull, because they can't fight. A lion can't actually really fight with you. You may think it can't, but it really can't, because they're cats, and if their bones are fragile and light, and they can break very easily. And if they're injured, they're going to die. They will not be able to feed themselves. And so they flee. Once they realize that their target is actually putting up the fight, they flee as fast as they can. And that is the reality of our adversaries, y'all. Once you actually get engaged in combat with them, once you fully stand up and refuse to lie down, refuse, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Azariah, Mishael, and Hananiah, like, they refuse to bow at the sovereign's command. They're like, everybody in the whole world's bowing down to this great statue of Nebuchadnezzar. And then you got these three dudes just standing there, and they're like, what the heck? Dang it, kill him. And then they're like, hey, you don't have the power of fire. You guys think just because you can light a match and put some pitch in a fire pit that you can kill us. They're like, Yahweh is sovereign over the fires. He surely can deliver us. And even if he doesn't, he's still the sovereign. And it's like they were thrown into the fire so that everyone in the world could see the Son of Righteousness in the flames. Like, I was thrown into the fire so that the rest of the world could see the Son of Righteousness amidst my consuming destruction. You know, you guys, some of you think because you lived, like, you have you're just worthless now. Like, you think your identity got destroyed, but you don't understand the fires that you survived, y'all, have refined you and made you for they've hardened you like a knife, y'all. Like a knife has a very sharp edge only so much as how hard it is. Like, if this knife, and I go to use it, the more I use it, the edge is going to get duller and duller and duller. But if I harden it, if I heat treat it to very specific temperatures for very specific amounts of times and cool it in a very specific fashion, if I do that in the right order, this thing will endure the testing of use. It endures that, right? You, by going through these situations and these experiences throughout your life, it has hardened you. It has forged you for a purpose. And you know what? That's why they fear us. That's why they try to force us down through these fickle little words that they have, through these semantics, through these labelings, through these the Bible of the psychologist's world, their little two-edged sword, the DSM-5, these with 60,000 invented diseases that are not reality, y'all. There is not a test for bipolar disorder, y'all. There is not a test for ADHD for a reason, because you cannot funnel people through a psychological and pharmaceutical industry without creating some kind of contrived diseases. You do not have bipolar disorder, y'all. You do not have paranoid schizophrenia. You do not have epilepsy, y'all. You have a need to understand your identity and your purpose, and you need deliverance and healing, bodily, soul, and spirit. And you know what? That comes by knowing your purpose. And Isaiah 65 and 66 has that so plainly written out that you guys can understand, you know what? Though I went through all this stuff, that's not what defines me. What defines me is that I have my mouth still. I still have my words. I still have my convictions. And you know what? He literally said that this is what's going to happen in the end of days. Check this out, y'all. Oh, yeah, here you go. People think this stuff isn't in the Bible. And a lot of Christian churches, I don't mean to pick on the denominations, but there's like 40,000 denominations, and every single one of them is like the daughter of Babylon. And so, like, a lot of people have been trained to not actually read their Bibles. The single, like I said, the aptitude that I just expressed early on was reading and comprehension. And like, if you all just pick this thing up and read it from beginning to end, it makes you so much deadlier, because they prey on our inability to read. Like, I had people who told me when I wrote my book, I needed to write it at a third grade level, because that's the comprehending ability of our society today. Like this is professional editors and publishers. They're like, you got to write it about a third grade level for somebody to be able to read your book. And that just sat like a lead brick in my stomach, because this is not reality. We had to get trained this way, but you know what? You can train yourself out of it, and it's by discipline and by diligence. And here's what Isaiah 66 says. I'm going to read a chapter of the scriptures, because you know what? Y'all need it, and I need it too. Thus said Yahuwah, the heavens are my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Where is this house that you build for me? And where is the place of my rest? And all these my hands has made, all these that exist, declares Yahuwah. Yet to such a one I look for, on him who is poor and crushed of spirit, and who trembles at my word. But whoever slays the bull strikes a man. Whoever slaughters the lamb breaks a dog's neck. Whoever brings a grain offerings, pig's blood. Whoever burns incense blesses an idol. Indeed, they have chosen their own ways, and their being delights in their abominations. I shall also choose their punishments and bring their fears on them. because I called, but no one answered. I spoke, and they did not hear. And they did evil before my eyes and chose what was displeasing to me. Hear the word of Yahuwah, you who tremble at his word. Your brothers who hate you, who cast you out for my name's sake, said Yahuwah, be esteemed, so that we see your joy. But they are put to shame. A roaring sound from the city, a voice from the Hakal, the temple, the voice of Yahuwah, repaying his enemies. Before she labored, she gave birth. Before it came pain to her, she was delivered of a male. Who has heard the like of this? Who has seen the like of this? Is a land brought forth in a day? Is a nation born at once? For as soon as Zion labored, she gave birth to her children. Shall I bring to birth and not give delivery, says Yahuwah? Shall I who give delivery restrain birth, said your Elohim? Rejoice with Jerusalem and be glad with her. All you who love her, rejoice greatly with her. All you who mourn for her, so that you feed and shall be satisfied with the breast of her comfort, so that you drink deeply and delight yourselves in overflowing esteem. For thus said Yahuwah, I am extending peace to her like a river, and the esteem of the nations like a flowing stream, and you shall feed, and shall be carried on the side, and fondled on her knees. As one whom his mother comforts, so I will comfort you. And in Jerusalem you are comforted, and you shall see, and your heart shall rejoice, and your bones flourish as tender grass. And the hand of Yahuwah shall be known to his servants, and his displeasure to his enemies. For look, Yahuwah comes with fire, and with his chariots like a whirlwind, to render his displeasure with burning, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For by fire and by his sword Yahuwah shall judge all flesh, and the slain of Yahuwah shall be many. Those who set themselves apart. This is literally describing SRH. Those who set themselves apart and cleanse themselves in their gardens after ones that are in their midst, eating the flesh of pigs and the abominations and the mouse, they shall be snatched away together, declares Yahuwah. And I, because of their works and their imaginations, am coming to gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my esteem. And I shall set a sign among them, and shall send some of the survivors to the nations, Tarshish and Pul and Lud, who draw the ball, and Tubal and Yawan, the coastlands afar off, who have not heard my report, nor seen my esteem. They shall declare my esteem among the nations, and they shall bring all your brothers as an offering to Yahuwah out of all the nations, on horses and in chariots and in litters and on mules and camels, to my set apart mountain, Jerusalem, declares Yahuwah, as the children of Israel bring an offering in to cleanse the house of Yahuwah. And from them too I shall take for priests, for Levites, declares Yahuwah. For as the new heavens and the new earth that I make stand before me, declares Yahuwah, so your seed and your name shall stand. And it shall be that from new moon to new moon, from Sabbath to Sabbath, all flesh shall come to worship before me, declares Yahuwah. And they shall go forth and look on the corpses of the men who have transgressed against me. For their worms shall not die, and their fire shall not be quenched, and they shall be repulsive to all flesh. You survivors are made to go and bring the witnesses to the nations. And by doing so, you're going to find your brothers out there. You're going to find your sisters out there. You're going to find your mother and your father out there. You're going to find that there's a family of people out there that you can never know unless you're willing to go through the scourge of public accusations and mockings, going through the wilderness of the deserts, the 40 days of starving, until you go to that place of testing and abandonment by everybody else, and you find your purpose and your identity out there in the wilderness. He will restore it to you, and then he will send you back to the nations. It's literally what John the Baptist was born for. They came to hunt him and murder him when he was an infant, and his father did not allow the sovereigns to touch his son. He sent his mother and his son away into the wilderness. He let them go be entrusted to the hands of Yahuwah, and he gave up his life to the assassins, Hashashin, the zealots that were sent by the king to cut it out of him, to torture him, to tell him where his son was. And you know what? He's like, you can have my life. I give it down for my son. That's the right move if you're a father. You give up your life for your children. You give up your life if you're the mother. You give up your life for your children. We sons should not be the ones who have to give up our lives so that our fathers and mothers have to live. But you know what? We will, because we love them and because we love the word of Yahuwah. So I eagerly contend for each and every one of you survivors. Share your testimony, because it says in Revelation 12:11, the enemy is defeated by the blood of the Lamb, the words of our testimony, and not loving our lives when faced with death. So be bold and willing to share your story no matter the cost, because you know what? By doing so, you're going to find the freedom that was promised to you from before the foundations of the world.
Oh my goodness. That was incredible. What words of encouragement for people? Because that can be so scary. I get people that reach out to me and they're like, I want to tell you my testimony. I'm not ready to tell other people. And I'm like, that's okay. Get it out. Tell somebody. That's so huge just to reach out to somebody. You're breaking every curse. It's like that lifts the spell that they cast on you as you're growing up. That's exactly what they invest all this time and money and energy and resources and handlers and plants and gosh, blackmail and all of it. Like that's why they do it, is so you don't share your testimony. And it's so incredibly powerful when you can stand in that. I had a survivor that I interviewed a couple times now, and she said a quote that like just sent chills down my body, and I got a lot of comments on it on her show. And she said about her abusers, it feels like they honed a really sharp weapon and now it's pointed at them. And I was like, yes, girl, that's it. Like take back those gifts that they exploited. Like you were born a divine child of God with these amazing gifts and talents. They saw it in you, and that's why you were chosen, except they exploited those gifts and made you feel guilty, and you got punished for having them and you got tortured. It's like the more, the more gifted you are, like the more torture you had to go through. It's so inverted. And that's how we create a better world, is literally by creating it. Like the world that we live in right now was created by them. This is Lucifer's kingdom that they've shoved us all in and infiltrated. And we can easily bring God and Jesus and our divination back by creating those things in our heart and by speaking that truth and bringing it out and getting rid of all the spells that they cast on it. And your testimony is such a strong, it's just so beautiful how you're able to recognize that, because I feel like a lot of people, even throughout their entire journey, they might not ever get there. And it clicks different when you hear somebody that went through that and they're saying, hey, I'm still here. Like I faced my worst fear. Like I thought all these bad things were going to happen, and they did. Like you were attacked. You were talking about that earlier. They tried to kill you, literally. So it's not that you didn't do this without consequence. And I know that there are people that are still enslaved that can't, they might not right at this moment, but that should be the goal, is for us to reclaim back those beautiful things about us that we've been led to shame, and to feel guilty about, and the things that they saw in us that they exploited, and to take them back and say, these are mine. What did God give these gifts to me for? What can I bring into the world? What can I create that's different from what they used me for? And you're doing it in so many ways. You have your book, your YouTube channel, you have your ministries, and you have just all these beautiful business ventures that you're doing. And it's just really lovely, Nathan. I love that you bring that hope, because these topics do get so dark, and I think for people, it can feel hopeless when you hear about these horrible things that happen. People get in this mind state where they're like, this is the world that we live in. This is horrific, and all these people are involved. Like, what are we going to do to combat it? And it's easier, like you said, to just maybe go back to living and not looking at it, because it feels so daunting, and I think you do a really fantastic job of outlining how all this works, how the who's, when's, where's, what's about it, but you also give solutions, which I think is really beautiful. And you're living the creations that were in your heart, like you and your wife have brought to life so many amazing things. So I just want to commend you. That was a really beautiful verse that you shared, and that was so lovely, all the words of encouragement that you gave to survivors.
Well, they're desperate for hope. We're starved for it. We're starved for it. Like you're they utilize this system. They'll call it like tortured artist syndrome or whatever else. But like you get into these high intelligence groups in Mensa and these other places where they're like, we're looking for the smartest and the best people. Well, they just torture their children. They're like, why do they do this? Like, why do they find the best and the brightest and then just ruin their lives and just systemically eradicate all of the things of what they had, finding the things that hurt them the most and then just drilling that into them. And they know that when someone who has innate expressive abilities and talents, extreme measures of them, when they find those people, those chosen ones, like you described them earlier, these people that have just, there's an anointing. And I really believe, like, y'all, like Hasatan, the dragon, like these dragons, the reason, okay, the Reynolds family, like back in, there's a book called The Golden Leaf, which is written by Patrick Reynolds, which was a history of the Reynolds family. Okay, he was a direct inheritor, was proposed to be one of the next direct inheritors to the big dynastic Reynolds family. My family is like the third branch of the Reynolds family. There was two brothers that kind of really got launched out in the mid 1800s, and one's name was Abraham, and he and his other brother, basically they took the Judas coin, this silver coin, this occultic coin that they had, and they touched it to gold, and it built an empire. Basically, one of those coins that Judas used, that was given to Judas when he betrayed Yeshua. And these are real physical objects, y'all. This isn't some kind of fairy tale kind of world. Like, this is reality. And the world works by these charged objects. And the blood of the Messiah was like the ultimate of all of these experiences, right? It's like the stake that he was impaled upon. These are like serious things, y'all. The people that took the spear. This is why the Spear of Destiny, I think it's in Hamburg, Germany right now. These are like serious charged objects, y'all. And people use these things to enact realities, physical realities, and transmutate a physical object through the spiritual realm into reality again. And they touched these gold coins, they touched their gold coins and built a dynastic empire. And they started utilizing things for tobacco and then aluminum and a lot of this stuff to build this empire. Well, Patrick Reynolds exposed a lot of that stuff. And it was because they were concealing for him. He was kind of like me, where you're just like, I can't stand corruption once I find it. And he just continued to see it over and over again throughout his life. And he's like, you know that these nicotine delivery systems that we're selling and making our fortune with are killing people. You know it, and you're suppressing this information. And rather than to continue to perpetuate the lie in order to receive the inheritance that was promised to him, he chose to be bold and to be willing to give up the temporary pleasures of sin and rather he was willing to suffer with the masses, right? Like, this is like so Moses, like, y'all, like, it's literally Hebrews 11. Just people are doing this all over every day of the week, y'all. You think you're the only ones who've got some junk in your trunk and some skeletons in your closet, y'all. Everybody's got it in there, y'all. We just have it in different levels of it. And they believed by torturing the children, you could express their greatest talents, but you could control when and how and where they expressed it. And so, like, people that have singing and dancing or theatrics, like, they get funneled into the whole Hollywood wanding systems for the prophets of Baal, and other people that are shoved in through the pornography industries and music industries. And they all get funneled into these different groups. But by doing so, what they're missing, what they're losing, is the innate ability to see a human being as something rare, as something precious, as something that is so set apart that one person could be the one that dismantles all of these things. I do not believe that we are outnumbered. I do not believe that we are losing. I do not believe any of those things, because I've tested it now for long enough to see that, you know, what's so beautiful is they have been shaking the cage. We've been shaking the cages collectively for so long now, and we're still here. We're still here. Like, we are still here. We can't be killed off. And you know what? That's because Yahweh says in his scripture that when a man's ways are pleasing before him, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. So, like, my family doesn't come after me like that. You won't see 400 comments of all of these handlers trying to, my family was trying to recruit other people and start mind controlling them as they were watching my videos in the comment sections. It was just so crazy, but they stopped. And I was like trying to really identify, like, when did they quit? When did they quit speaking out? Like, they started deleting all their Facebooks. They started taking down all the pictures of all the naked children that they had on there. They started like they're like, oh crap, we better cover this stuff up because it's not going away. All of the triggers that they built in to make me shut up and be quiet and all that, they're like, it's not working. It's not working. And what did they try to do instead? You know, and they're like, well, chop his fingers off and take him out of the brotherhood and all the rest of it. And they started trying to dismantle and smear over the empire. And then, like, you start to see that they tremble. They genuinely get infected with the very same fear, because the spirits that are empowering these people, y'all, they have to submit themselves to the divine authority that is in reality, that governs creation. And it is that Yahweh is still on his throne, and his son has been given all power, authority, and dominion over these beings. And you know what? He really did take captivity captive and bring forth good gifts to his father. Like, when he faced death in the garden was that moment when he was sweating drops of blood, when he was becoming undone. Like, this is disintegration. Isaiah said it. He became disintegrated. Job literally said, all my inner friends have abandoned me. Job was DID, y'all. Like, they just didn't have all these stupid names for it. They just knew this was personhood. This was humanity's experience on this earth, was suffering. He calls it the fellowship of suffering in there. And some of us, it literally says, you're storing up in your body suffering that the rest of the body is abdicating. They've looked at it They known that if they weigh into it just to watch the rest of an interview, just to stay with it a little longer would cause them suffering. But they have been so conditioned to be comfortable, like the air-conditioned lifestyle that we've lived in, the comfortable chairs, like that our butts don't ever sit on the ground, that we don't experience the sun scorching on us and the heat of unbelievable hard labor on our backs. They know that if I look at that, if I face that, I am responsible to weigh into the fray, that I have a duty to guard. I have a duty to help and combat these things. That means I might have to open my home up to these people. That means I might have to sacrifice what I have in my comfort to empower somebody else to live. That means it's going to be costly. And you know what? They fear the sacrifice that's required. But you know what? That fear is so fickle. It's like a little tiny mouth that's screaming as loud as it possibly can all of the time. That fear is a failure for you to identify reality. And you know what? If you all would be willing to weigh into the fray with us, to come join us in the muck and the mire, to just get bloody knuckles and bruised knees and calm down and lay on the ground with us like Tom did when I was screaming and weeping and wailing. And I had groans inutterable, like it describes. Like I couldn't even speak. Like I couldn't even say the words. There was no humanness left in me anymore. All I knew was grief. I was so grieved at what I had done and what had been done to me. And I wanted innocence restored. I wanted identity restored. I wanted my life back. I wanted my life back. I wanted my youth. You know, when I had a strong back, I wanted my feet back. I wanted my hands back. I wanted my eyes back. I wanted my hearing back. I wanted my sense of touch. Like I wanted my body to be mine back. I wanted it back. I was so broken bodily. And here I am trying to start a family, and I can't even stand, you know? I couldn't function, and it wasn't fair. And I just came undone. A lot of people look away from us when we become undone, and it's because they're cowards. You're a coward. If you look at somebody who's divulging the most vulnerable, broken, painful, embarrassing, wounded moment of their life, and you turn away, you're complicit. Do you understand? You're complicit. You are someone who has looked away from someone and you are now an enabler of the system. You are someone who is contributing to the fear. You are someone who is fueling the kingdom of deceit. And you know what? You're guilty. You're guilty before him and before all of the list of accusers who can now stand in front of you and say, you did nothing. You did nothing. And you know what? That's on you. And until you go to the Father and repent of your cowardice, you're going to continue to be consumed by it because it's a curse. You're under a curse. You're not supposed to be a coward. You're supposed to have confidence, but the confidence comes from your convictions, and those convictions can only come from hearing. Like it says, faith comes from hearing. Like, you can't believe anything until you hear it. We're supposed to hear this word being spoken. We're supposed to be able to understand it. And you know, when you step into a pulpit, when you step into a room and you sit in a room and somebody tells you a few scriptures out of this and a whole lot of psychological pep talks, and you walk out of there thinking you just took your daily dose of deliverance or daily dose of doctrine and you're good to go, you have failed to see the forest for the trees. Like, there is no thing of forest. You can't hug a forest. You can never walk into an actual forest. Like, a forest is a collection of trees. So where is the forest when you're in the forest? Like, it's an idea. It's the same thing as like a group versus an individual. Just because two people stand next to each other doesn't actually make them a group. There is no group. We're all individuals, y'all. There is not supposed to be any sovereign. There's supposed to be no king over us but Yahweh Elohim Sebaoth, the Lord of hosts, as he was called in a lot of people's scriptures. There's not supposed to be any sovereign over us of men. Men are not supposed to rule each other. We're not supposed to dominate each other. Like, but it was these sons of Cain. It was these doctrines of demons that began to come in. It was these watchers and Azazel and Gadriel and all these. They started coming in and being like, let's show you the secrets of heaven. Like, they started enticing women and showing them witchcraft and the cutting of roots and sorcery, how to do remote viewing and astral projection, and starting how to do magic. And like, they started showing them how to dial the phone book of the demonic world. And they got caught up in this, they got enraptured, it says. It's like they literally just became possessed by it, you know? And then they just began to govern the societies with it. And instead, we have an opportunity right now where all the information is available to us, like so that none of you are without excuse. Like none of you are without excuse. Now you're responsible, right? But you think by shoving your head back in the sand that you're not going to be accountable for the information that you've heard. You are absolutely accountable. And if you're not using your time, your energy, and your resources to help contend against this great, radical, intelligent evil that's out there, you are wasting your life. You're wasting your livelihood. You're wasting all of your time. Like if I just stayed there on the floor in that ruined heap of mess and no one came alongside me and prayed for me, the purpose would have been poisoned with the impassioned view of passivity. Everybody else in that room stood there. There was 400 people that are supposed to be the mighty believers. We're the remnant that are rising up. You know what? When you're tested, by the survivors, by the way, when we come along into your life and test you to see whether your convictions are authentic and you fail that test, believe me, the witness is there. It says like it's like you don't cause a blind man to go into a pit. Otherwise, he's going to, the cries of the poor are going to come up to Yahweh. When you see someone who's poor and naked and hungry and destitute, and you say, go, be blessed, be well fed, be clothed, your prayers get hindered. Like the Father turns against you. He becomes adversarial towards you when you turn away from this. When you turn instead against the acute, you side with the perpetrators. Like the reason I was so enraged at all of this was how often everybody sided with the perpetrators. Like they don't even know these people. I'm like, I've been your best friend for 15 years and you're going to side with some guy who's a Knights of Columbus, Fourth Order Knights of Columbus guy who literally is publicly known for doing these things. And you're like, yeah, that guy's probably better. You're like, what the heck is it? It's a spiritual anointing that is coming against them. They're missing it because they're contending with the spiritual forces because they have so many doors open to the enemy and so much fear in gripping their heart that they can't get out of it. But you know what? It comes through humility. If you're willing to say, you know what, I have been beguiled, I have been deceived, and maybe I don't understand, but maybe I'm willing to stand here with you, stand here alongside you. And even if I don't believe it all, even if I don't even have a comprehending understanding of really what's going on, I just want you to know I love you. I just want you to know that I'm still here with you, and I'm not going to forsake you and leave you behind. And I'm not going to go then become an ally to all your perpetrators and speak out against you all the time. If you're willing to do that, you can transform somebody who is so talented and so gifted. You can fuel them on their journey to setting other captives free. Because I'll tell you what, the more survivors I get to know throughout my life, the more I have seen that these are some of the most incredible humans that have ever been born. These are the Daniels. These are the John the Baptist. These are the Gideons. These are the Samsons. These are literally the Deborahs. These are Hannah. These are, like, you read about these characters in the scriptures, these authentic, real humans who were so different. They're like Miriam, this little girl who's out there guarding baby Moses. And she's the one who literally goes right up to the princess of Mitzrayim, the one who had the power to slaughter all the infants. And she's in there instead, and she's interceding for her mother to be the caregiver for her baby brother. Like they're these brave warriors who are like right in the fray of it, and they're not running away in the face of it. This is why the survivors are going through this suffering, y'all, because they were chosen before the foundations of the world to make a difference, to make an impact, to fight ferociously in this great contest that we're all locked in. And you know what? The adversary knew it, because you know what? That was the thing that they realized. These dragons, these beings, they have the ability to see into the future. This is a reason when Yeshua was contending with the dragon, he literally says he took him up to a great high mountain and he showed him all the kingdoms and the nations and the reigns of the earth in a moment of time. So he showed him the future, and he said, all these I will give to you if you only bow down and worship me. Right? And he's like, has it not been written? Here's the dangerous sword, right? You shall worship Yahweh Elohim, and him only shall you serve. And the dragon can show people the future. And it's true. They're foretellers. This is why people do these rituals. They drink the dragon's blood and they believe they can see the future. But the problem is they see through these one little eyes. They see through their little all-seeing eye. They think because they saw through the eye of Horus that they know the future. The Reynolds family saw what the future would become with aluminum and tobacco, with petrochemicals. They got to see a lot of these things. And so they designed their empire ahead of the game. You know, they got the tip that the stock was going to go public, and they got to buy a bunch of shares before everybody else did. They bought them for a penny where everyone else bought them for $171. They set themselves up to be in the position of power. But the problem is that the adversary, even though he can see into the future and show people a glimpse of time, he can never show you what happens when someone makes a choice that changes it all. He, even though knew there was prophecies that Moses was going to come, even though there were prophecies that Abraham was going to come, even though there were prophecies Yeshua was going to come, even though all of these things came, they still walked into their own demise. They still ended up in the very snare. It says they will dig pits and they're going to fall in them. When they set up all this world system to capture all of us, people are like, they got AI and mass surveillance and all these things. They're going to win. No, y'all, they're designing their own prison. You got to understand, Yahweh says what they intend for evil, Yahweh is going to intend for good in the saving of many lives. That's what happened with Joseph. Though they threw him into a prison cell for 17 years of his life, Yahweh brought him out of there and he set him up to be the sovereign's servant. And he saved the world. One man saved the world. One man saved all the house of Israel. He brought them out across the Red Sea. And you know what? And he led them right into the wilderness of testing. And you know what? This is what we are here for. This is our great time of life. Rejoice, because this is our day of salvation is truly drawing near. And so many of us have the opportunity to eagerly fight way into the fray and seek to save the lost, to set the captives free, and to bind up those brokenhearted. So I am so glad that we can kind of be together in this battle, y'all. I did not know back then that I would have the opportunity to still be speaking 7 years later, that I'm still here and I still get the opportunity to do this. My family is still growing. I have children and I have a wife and I have friends and I have family and I still get to live. And I'll tell you, and I get to live with a lot of suffering still amidst those circumstances. I still want my body back that was tortured. I still want my mind back that was taken from me. I still desire those things. I desire the freedom that they took from me. But you know what? I choose to forget the past. I choose to let it go. Though I've seen it and I've witnessed it and I deal with it and I confront it, I'm choosing to let it go. And I'm choosing to hold on to this unknown, this expectation of something I can't see. I'm choosing every day that that's what I want. I want life. I choose this day life and not death. And I'm encouraging you. I'm challenging you. Those of you who are survivors, those of you who are families of them, hold on to life. Keep pursuing life at all the cost, because by doing so, we are going to set the captives free.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Whew. That was amazing. I love when we can take, again, things that were used against survivors. Jesus was one of those things, the Bible, and realize the power that it holds in empowering all of us, and what these inversions, if we take them back to their original meaning, and just again coming back into our own power, reclaiming that and dismissing the things that they inverted and saying, no, I'm taking this back and this is what it is for me. It's so powerful, Nathan. You do such a great job just hyping people up, and you have your own weight that you're carrying on your shoulders, and somehow you are able to not only carry the weight of other people, but be so expressive in your encouragement, and we need more of that. I always say survivors are going to save the world. That's what I've thought ever since I've gone into this. Again, these are very intelligent, gifted, just amazing humans, and again, that's why they were chosen. And so being able to reclaim that is just so powerful. And I really appreciate you saying that to everybody, because I think the person on the other side, whether you're a survivor in the same way Nathan is, or if you've just had hard times in your life, like that's where it's for all of us. We all have that power to heal and reclaim. Nathan, I wanted to ask you, one of the things that, again, like, I get comments on this all the time and I get asked, and I wanted to see if you could maybe give just a little bit of advice, just personally. I know you can't speak on behalf of everybody, but just from your own experience, how did you rebuild your relationship with Jesus again after what you went through? And how did you build that trust with him and be able to trust him with your healing after all the different ways that was used against you?
I kept believing. I chose to believe that his word was true and every man was a liar. I didn't know. It was so confusing for so long. But I had a foundation, and I'm thankful on one side of it. I'm thankful for my family that raised me. There's another survivor named Mary Lou Lake. and Dr. Michael Lake, her husband, they have a ministry called Kingdom Intelligence Briefing, or Biblical Life Seminary is also his another facet of his ministry. I highly recommend them, Mail. They were instrumental in my own healing and restoration process. Their prayers for the morning and the evening, and trauma and fragmentation, the breaking of soul ties, breaking of sexual unions, they were instrumental for me. I put them in the back of my book. You'll find them there at the very end of my book. On my YouTube page, I read them. They're called Resources for War. And those prayers were very effective at helping me to contend against the spirits of doubt and deception, because even as you go along in this process of remembering and of healing, you start unearthing a lot of deceit. So they have a ministry located in Missouri, but they were speaking out and sharing. She came from a background moderately similar to mine, but more so in a just the female side of it. So those of you female survivors out there in particular, I really encourage you. She wrote a book called What Witches Don't Want Christians to Know. All of you should read it because it's got super critical information. But she said something during one of her interviews that just profoundly helped me to understand how to still have value and appreciation for the family that I have, regardless of the circumstances and the things that took place. And she said, like, she was praying and really wrestling with a lot of these things, like why did I have to go through this stuff? A lot of those questions, the big whys, I'll just say it real plainly. Insatiable curiosity is what really got me to the place of deliverance in my life. Was I had to know the truth. I always had a need to know. And that need to know got driven deeper and deeper and deeper. And the more deception I found, the more I knew I had to keep pursuing for hunting for the truth. And she was praying about, like, why was I raised in this family? And the Father helped her understand that it really was that she still was able to get her basic needs met throughout her life. Her life was still preserved because of the family that she had. And you know what? The blessings that I did have by the family that I was raised with is that I still got to witness the disciplines of a righteous man. My father still had a love for this word. My family and the people around me, I still got to see people that had a hunger for his word. And you know what? It really is the only thing in all of creation that 100% never returns empty. Like this word is alive. Like it really is a living sword that can cut right through the hearts of deception, and it can just utterly destroy all the doctrines of demons and doubt and despair and everything that had kind of been used and weaponized against you can get undone through systemic, consistent convictions to read this word and to follow it out, to live life like he said. This is how you should live your life. Go and do this and you'll live. Go and do this and you'll die. Like, it's a very simple book, and at the same time it's the most complicated thing I've ever encountered in my life, because I had that hunger, that need to understand so early in my life. And because I read it, I knew what it said. And I soon learned, by like 12 years old, I soon had figured out that the vast majority of people who claim to be followers of this book have never read it. And I realized that it set them all up to be living hypocrites, and it set them all up to be quickly destroyed. And it's so strategic. If you say you're a follower of this thing and you don't actually know what it says, you're going to lose when you meet somebody who knows what it says, and they can utterly eviscerate you. And you're going to be like, wow, you're either going to quit and you're going to go become some other person and follow some broad way to destruction, or you're going to go ahead and be like, you know what? I don't know. And if I'm ignorant now, let me not be found ignorant again. Let me go find out for myself. And so you can test all these things, and I can hold on to that which is true. And so when my realizations came to a lot of these events, if anything, it drove me deeper, because I knew that there was only one person, there was only one being in all of creation that could tell me who I was. And it would actually be real. It would actually be true, and it would actually be immutable. It can never be stopped. And my identity was going to be found in there. If I wanted to know who I was and what I was born for and why I'm here and everything that I've ever wanted to know in my life, I believed that I could find it right in there. And because of that, even as I began to remember a lot of these things, even as aspects of my being and portions of my soul began to express their rage, their frustration, their confusion, like the big giant question that a lot of people wrestle with: why didn't he stop it? Why didn't he stop it? If he is all powerful, if he is the all sufficient one, if he is the one who has everlasting power and might and glory and could save us, why didn't he stop it? Like, and I believe me, of anybody on this earth who has wrestled with that question, it is I. And it is because it's a good question. And you know what? You deserve the answer. And the answer for me was because, you know what? I was born. I was born to endure. I was born to overcome. I was born to keep going no matter the circumstances. Like it says in the very beginning of 2 Peter, this is just so good. Just check this out for a second. If you're willing, like the version of healing that I was going through, y'all, I'll just say this. I've tried a lot of different little healing methodologies out there, and I found a bunch of witches and warlocks mixed right up into the Mets. And at the same time, I found the most effective, simple form of healing for me was sitting down and crying, praying, a lot of crying, but just praying and asking the Father to bring to remembrance anything I needed to know in order to be healed, but that he would help to buffer those emotions so that they're not overwhelming, right? And that I wouldn't be traumatized by anything else. I had a counselor who shared with me a point that I didn't need to go into such detail with my wife about every single thing I went through, right? And that he said it in a way that's going to offend some of you, y'all. He said, you're going to defile her by doing so. And at first I was really pissed. I really didn't like that he said that. It was not necessarily best for me to share every detail of everything that I went through with her. It's kind of like you don't need to share all the intimate details of every other one of your previous partners with your spouse. Like, not beneficial. But he said that, and I wrestled with that really hard, and I was really frustrated. And so I used to go and write a lot. Like, I've written many other books besides Snatched from the Flames. I've thrown all of them into the fire except for that one, because you realize as you're wrestling with these big, horribly brutal, painful, frustrating, unanswerable questions that there's only one who's going to ever be able to answer that. And to me, those answers always were found here. I would sit there with my scriptures, I would pray, and I would ask the Father to help to restore all these things. I'd pour out all of the horrible stuff that happened, walk my way all the way through the memory, let that kind of part of me go through all of the expression that it needed to. I would lay it out, and it was just like that vault got opened up, and all of the evil that was trapped in there, all of the anger and the rage and the frustration and all of those horribly unanswerable questions. If I turn to a human being in the middle of the room, like a counselor or somebody else, or a friend who should be your counselor, like you should have friends that are counselors. It's like what your spouse is supposed to be, your counselor. If I just turned on her in that moment all the time and poured out all those unanswerable questions, believe me, y'all, you cannot answer those questions to somebody that's in that state. There's nothing you can say to them that will ever actually answer that question for them unless it comes through the origin source of truth, which is this word. And so you have to wash somebody who's in that state with the water of the word. It's the only thing that cleanses those abominations, those defiling things, all of the garbage that's inside them. It's the only thing that will actually wash that room clean and give that inner space of their soul what it was supposed to have, which was cleanliness, purity, hope. That you have to do that through this word. And I know some of y'all went through Jesus programming, and they've used the Bible for so many generations to try to build programming systems and all this stuff, so that as you seek counseling and seek help and healing, that if you walk in and hear, you're exposed to these words, that it comes undone. But why I use the names of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh instead of God and Lord or Yahuwah or Jesus and not Jesus, I use Yeshua, is because there was a lot of that was built into me too. And I found that it helped me to get past a lot of that, like kind of the internal just wiring backwards and against it, came when I started finding restored names of the scriptures, and I was able to read them without having all these other reactions that were programmed into me for so long. I was able to read these versions of the scriptures. But if I read the NIV or the KJV, I was having all these freak out weird stuff that was going on. I was like, what the heck is all this? I didn't know about a lot of the methodologies that were used at the time, but I found by reading the scriptures in those vulnerable states that the Father always would speak to me and help me to understand what it really was, what my true calling really was, what my purpose, what my identity, why I went through that. Like he's the only one that can answer that, like why he didn't intervene. And you know what? This is literally what it says here. This is 1 Peter 5. And when the chief shepherd appears, you shall receive the never fading crown of esteem. In the same way, you younger ones, be subject to elders and gird yourselves with humility toward one another. For Elohim resists the proud, but gives favor to the humble. Humble yourselves then under the mighty hand of Elohim, so that he exalts you in due time, casting all of your worry, your anxieties upon him, for he is concerned about you. Be sober, watch, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Resist him, firm in the belief, knowing that the same hardships are experienced by your brotherhood in the world. And the Elohim of all favor, who called you to his everlasting esteem by Messiah Yeshua, after you have suffered a while, himself perfect, establish, strengthen, and settle you. To him be the esteem and the might forever and ever. If you go to, this is the last words of his letter that he wrote, okay? He starts out his next book. I just love this. This is favor and peace be increased to you in the knowledge of Elohim and of Yeshua, our master, as his mighty like power has been given to us all we need for life and reverence through the knowledge of him who called us to esteem and uprightness. Through these there have been given to us exceedingly great and precious promises, so that through these you might be partakers of the mighty like nature, having escaped from the corruption in the world caused by lust. And for this reason, do your utmost to add to your belief uprightness, to uprightness, knowledge, to knowledge, self-control, to self-control, endurance, to endurance, reverence, to reverence, brotherly affection, and to brotherly affection, love. For if these are in you and increase, they cause you to be neither inactive nor without fruit in the knowledge of our Master Yeshua Messiah. For he in whom these are not present is blind, short-sighted, and has forgotten that he has been cleansed from his old sins. For this reason, brothers, all the more do your utmost to make firm your calling and choosing. For if you are doing these matters, you will never stumble at all. For in this way, an entrance into the everlasting reign of our Master and Savior, Yeshua Messiah, shall be richly supplied to you. Those are the things that reinvigorated in me my relationship with him, that I knew if he would not let go of me. Like, he would never let go of me. I used to do whitewater river rafting, and we would go through this place called the Arkansas River down in southern Colorado, and they have these rapids. They have a rating for like the volume of water that goes over a given body of rocks in a river at any given time. They have classes of them. So class 1, just kind of more basic, and then they build over time in amplitude, in class 2s and class 3, and then class 4 and class 5 rapids, huge, ridiculous rapids. Well, that river system has specifically class 4 rapids during the springtime. Well, there was this flood that year, and so all of those normal class 4 rapids that I'd rafted down every summer were totally different creatures. Unimaginably so. A river that was 40 feet deep now was 80 feet deep. And so they had to close this area under the Royal Gorge Bridge because there's a super deep canyon there. I think it's almost 1,000-foot tall canyon. This bridge goes over it, and you would raft under it. And in that canyon, all that water gets funneled into this place. Well, the water was so powerful, it was taking these massive river rafting guide boats that they take down there, and it was folding them in half and exploding them. And they closed that section of the river. So my dad and I went on this trip, and we were still doing the class 4 and class 5 rapids, but the upper section of it, which we'd done many times. And when you go out on that trip, one of the guides looked at everyone before we went in, and he talked to us about after we all get thrown out, because he's like, it's happening. You're going to get thrown out. You're all going to be swimming at some point in this. This is insane. People are dying. It's awesome. I love that stuff. But he was like calm, cool, and collected, right? Like a good guide should be. And he warned us ahead of time, when you get thrown out of the boat, or if you're the one who's still in the boat, and we see people, because they're going to be like Pez candy floating around in the water out there, and they're going to be like panicked, frightful. You got like 60, 70-year-old people in there that are like, I signed up for this trip and I came in from Kansas. I just thought it would be like a river trip. And they're like used to, and these people just get smashed. These people have no concept of what they're about to weigh into, and it's fantastically scary for them. But my dad and I were positioned on the front of the raft because we had a lot of experience, and we were good at listening and obeying, right? That's Shema, like hear and do. Like when a guide tells you 4 strokes to the right, to the guy on the front right boat, 4 strokes, not 5. You do 5, everybody dies. Stuff like that. We were on the front. Well, then there was this older couple that really wanted to be in the front, and they paid a lot of extra kind of like tip money to be like, hey, let us be in the front. It looks so cool up there. It looks so fun up there. And the guide kept being like, it's not a good idea. We're going through like hell right out here. We're barely making it. And so we had like 3 or 4 other very weaker people who he had positioned in the raft at places where they're not as strategically needed. Well, these people really demanded that they get the front seats. They got the front seat. And he told us all, if anybody gets drawn out of the water, and if you're in the position on the raft, when you come alongside them, you're going to be grabbing them. And he always would say, you grab a hold of them, right? This safety trust thing. You hold on to each other's wrists, right? And he's like, you look them in the eyes and you tell them, I will not let go of you. And then you tell them, say it to me. And they look you in the eyes and say, I will not let go of you, right? And you're supposed to you lock in and you say that. And it was like, we went down this course of rapids, and sure enough, those people at the very front, right when we got into it, you could get through it by 2 ways. You could either go to the right or to the left. But if you hit it on the center, you're going to get launched and everybody's going swimming. And he gave them the command for the amount of strokes that they were supposed to do. And the person at the front right corner panicked. They locked up. because you're looking at a wall of water that's 30 feet tall. And I mean, you're going to drive into it, and you're supposed to. And the guide kept telling us, we're going to drive straight into that rock. We're going to go straight for it. And then we're going to do one maneuver, and it's going to move us exactly around it. And people, when you finally face this wall that's hitting you, you just watched them. They just did this, right? And they got all the photographers standing there on the shore. It's hilarious. They got all these camera people waiting because they know everybody's going swimming. And it just makes for great pictures. The person froze in the face of the fear. And sure enough, we hit that thing, and I catapulted out of that boat so fast. And the guide had told me, like, a rule. He said, never let go of your oar, your paddle. And so I took him very seriously. It's like in the military. They're like, never drop your rifle. Every time you drop your rifle, or the sound of a rifle drop, everybody's getting smoked. You're going to have a really bad day. It was a big deal. So like when somebody told me, like, don't drop your oar, I was like, you got it, man. And so I got launched into the river and ended up going through a washing machine. And the whole time holding onto this paddle, man, I went from the top of the surface of the water, 60 feet straight down to the bottom in a washing machine, and got trapped down there and launched up. I almost drowned. We went through 4 class 5 rapids, all just me floating around, still holding this oar this whole time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to be able to swim. But the guy told me, don't let go of this thing. I'm in just this total lockup mode going through these rapids. Finally, I remember I can make my own free choice, and I can let go of this stupid thing that's going to kill me and swim to the shore. But there was a lot of great pictures of me along the way with this stupid otter. Along that journey, by letting go of this thing that was hindering me, I was able to swim to the shore and get free, right? I puked up all this water because I almost drowned. It was fantastic. It was a great time. And I've never forgotten those words. They were seared into my mind. I will never let go of you. And this is literally what our Messiah is looking at us, and he's saying to us, like, no one can snatch you out of my hand. He's like, I have written your name in the palm of my hand, and no one can take you away from me. And you know what? He is hunting us. He is the chief shepherd who's going after us all. I went and became a shepherd over the years of goats and sheep. I hate goats. Kill them all. They're great for food and meat. Otherwise, they need to die. But sheep are amazing. But you really do, as a shepherd, you literally have to go chase down these stupid animals sometimes. They go running off. They find ways to kill themselves. And you're like, you literally ran towards the coyotes. I don't even get it. You have to go hunt them down. And you know what? There is nothing more powerful than when the flock gets to witness the shepherd go rescue a wounded lamb. Like this is why the people of Israel, when they said David was the shepherd boy, like we think of him as this little tiny child, that he literally says he snatched the lamb out of the mouth of a lion. Like, people just, like, they don't get it. You lack context. I've been raised in the mountains where there's lions and bears and stuff, and I've chased them. I chased them with super soakers and guns and rocks and pans, and I used to chase them. And like, when you go into the mouth of a lion and pull out another creature while this thing's alive, you guys think he killed it and then he took it out. And oh man, they wrestle these things out of their mouths. Like, that is a chief shepherd. And this is what our Messiah is willing to do. He is willing to step down into that filthy place with you. He is willing to drive down and cast off his robes of glory and splendor and weigh into the fray and be like, I am here with you, and I will not leave you. That he will not leave you. You think it's hard when people write a comment that say, like, I can't watch this because it's tough. How about the guy who stands there in there with you? And he's like literally not going to quit. He is going to figure out a way to work all of this for good and for the deliverance of your life, but not just your life, the lives of many. I'm pretty sure Joseph wanted out of the prison. I'm pretty sure he wanted out of the false accusations and all of the other garbage that got laid on him. I know he wanted out, but you know what? He continued to entrust himself to the Father and say, you know what? He can make it is an easy thing for Yahweh to make a poor man rich in a day. It's an easy thing to go from the house of the prison chamber to the king's commander. Like, it's easy for him to do this with any of us. And you know what? If you continue to faithfully entrust yourself and say, I trust that you can set me free whenever you're ready to. I love you, and I want to believe your words, and I'm going to choose to believe them even if it doesn't make sense. It will set you free and help empower you to be able to confidently go forward in your life and fulfill the destiny that you were made to have.
Amen. Thank you for answering that. That's a question that both of those, the one just of trusting God and then where was he? So I really appreciate you addressing both of those, because I get asked that a lot. And I think it's more important to come from somebody like you. You know, I don't always know the best words to say, and I know it's just your personal experience, but I hope it can help people on the other side. And before we go today, I'd love to have you back on, by the way. I feel like I could talk to you for another 10 hours. You're so animated and just intelligent, and you break things down so well. But please talk about your book a little bit, tell people where they can find you, and just talk about all the things that you're working on, because you have your hands dipped, you and your wife, in a million things. So tell people how they can connect with you and support you.
Yeah, My book's available, like you said, on Amazon. Snatched from the Flames. I wrote it in such a way, y'all, to try to help build that bridge between survivors and people that are outside of this entirely. And so, yes, there's parts of it that are a hard read, but there's but there's a lot of it that's really has nothing to do with the background that I come from. A lot of it is just is walking into a place of understanding and casting off the traditions that I inherited that were lies, not just the deep dark ones, like the ones I inherited in the Christian church, the ones I inherited amidst the realities of life, this false illusion that we got about the American dream and society, and so it's a progression of that. And like you said, it's a love story. I want people to understand that your whole life is all about a love story between the Father and you, and between him and his creation. And it's a beautiful love story, and it's bloody, and it's ragged, and it's ruined. And you know what? He rebuilds the waste places, and he is all about the ones who are restoring the breach. And I wrote that to try to contend against it and try to restore that breach. So listen, y'all, just real quick. I know some of you cannot afford anything. I get it. I was in that position when I went to that conference with Russ Dizdar. I had lost everything. Not everything. I had lost a vast majority of any financial capacity that I had in my life. I got blacklisted for jobs and everything else. But Russ Dizdar, when he was on the stage that time and talking about all these things, he said that if any of you can't afford my book, but he had a lot of books, but he said, if any of you can't afford it for any reason, he said, it's a gift for you. Please just go ahead and take one. It's there for you on my table. Go take it anytime you need it. And he said, you don't got to tell me anything. You're going to ask. You're going to do anything. He just made it totally shameless, right? Like there was no shaming of anything. He was just like, just go take it if you need it. It's for you. And so I've always had that same principle that I've used, because I was in a position where I had to go get that book. I got that copy of The Black Awakening because of that. And it was one of the most instrumental books for me in understanding what was taking place. And so I have the same thing. If any of you can't afford my book for any reason, don't keep that from it. I give it away freely. It's all on my website, snatchedfromtheflames.com. You can read the entire book there. I also have an audiobook that I did of the entire book. It's on my YouTube in a playlist, or it's also on the website. If you go to every chapter there, I did the audiobook of it. I also have an ebook version of it and an audiobook format. If you need it and you don't have access to the means to buy it, you don't need to give me any money, y'all. I want you to know that you can email me and I'll send you direct downloads to it. It's also in descriptions of a lot of my videos. I just put the download links in there. I also did a audio recording of the entirety of the scriptures from beginning to end, from the ISR 2009 scriptures, because I thought that was far more important than my book. Honestly, if there's anything I could encourage y'all to read, it's not necessarily in my book. It's just that. Just please understand, it's far more valuable that y'all actually listen and study and diligently understand the scriptures. It's way more valuable than anything I've ever said in my life. This is the words of life. And as long as you continue to wash yourself in them, it will transform you. So I also have that free for download on there as well. There's a link to a Google Drive where you can download all the links to that. But yeah, my wife and I have, like you said, our hands in a lot of things. The first and foremost one was the path of healing that we went. We wanted to be fed and watered and clothed. And so along the way, the Father helped to reveal to us natural fiber garments of linen and wool and silk. And I stopped wearing cotton because I was always sweating all the time and miserable and anxious. And I found out that natural fiber garments really actually made my body feel better, and they helped me to heal. I had a lot of sensitivity in my body, understandably, but I felt very, very uncomfortable almost all of my life. And natural fiber garments literally helped me feel peace in a totally different way, bodily. And they allowed me to detox as well. And so the second big thing that we are really, really passionate about is making sure people have access to that. So we started the Linen Railroad, where we send people natural fiber garments and for free. We want people to have access to them. And so we have people all over the country now that go out to thrift stores and Goodwills, and they buy them up and they'll ship them to us, or they'll ship them to other brothers and sisters. So it's called the Linenites. That's what they're called. And these are just savage warriors for the kingdom of Yah. And these are people that are dressed funky and in wrinkly clothes. And we love Yah, and we love people, and we love people to just be naturally themselves as they were made to be. Just go and live an authentic human experience. And the other big one was proper nutrition. I had a lot of fatigue and adrenal syndrome problems and a lot of burnout bodily. And so I was constantly trying to hack my own way back to health, and a lot of supplementation and all this stuff that costs so much money, and all these therapists and people are like, you got to use all these different very expensive things in order to be able to have that. And I really believe that the Father made simple cures in his word. And one of that was living bread. And so we started learning about the fresh milling your own grains, organic grains. And it was like I ate my bread to satisfaction. I finally got the nutrients and the vitamins that I needed to support my body without having to pay a fortune all the time. Because just to be real transparent with y'all, we've just been very, very poor for a long time ever since we came out with all that stuff. And we couldn't afford any of those things. So we just were like, what's the cheapest way I can get my bodily needs met. And it was simple. He said, I'm the bread of life. Yeshua literally came and was like, I'm the bread of life. And I'm like, well, then why is everyone gluten intolerant? Why are we all so sick from bread? I'm like, dang it. Everyone is by design, because Satan literally asked to sift Peter like wheat, and they sifted out the bran and the germ. The devil loves to sift out the bran and the germ. That's why when you go to the store, you buy dead bread and you feel like garbage after you eat it. It's because it's dead. But if you fresh mill the grain at home for pennies, you can literally have the bread. You can eat your bread to satisfaction, like you're promised in the scriptures. He said that you will eat it and you'll be satisfied. And it was one of the best things that ever happened, because so we are really passionate about making sure that everybody has access to fresh milled flour, that you can have fresh living bread every single day, and it will help your body heal. You'll be able to do your bodily functions will be able to take place and help you get that restoration, that cleansing, the detoxification, so that you can get your energy back. Because so much of why people are so unwilling to weigh into this battle is because they're fat, sick, and nearly dead. Even if they're not bodily fat, inside they're full of death, they're full of toxins, and they can't think, they can't eat, they can't comprehend things. And so we're really passionate about bread, water, and clothing. And so we're all about those things. I started jumping in rivers and creeks and doing cold water thermogenesis, jumping into cold water with your linen. It feels amazing. And then what literally happens is toxins come out of your skin. I've had my shirts will literally get dyed yellow and black as toxins come out, because you're putting on a giant bandage. This is what bandages used to be for thousands of years, were linen. Used to wrap people in linen, and all these toxins come out. They call it the Spanish mantle. And it used to be the way people cured people forever, was putting them linen on. If you put linen on post-surgical sites, it'll recover 40% faster. This is like public mainstream stuff. If you put linen bandages on an injury, it will heal 40% faster. But if you put GMO treated garbage glyphosate cotton on it, it's going to slow that down. Shocker. But this is what we were designed to do. He designed our bodies to heal themselves. You don't need a white robe priest known as a doctor to heal you. You don't need a clinical psychologist to heal you. You need the living word. You need his Ruach HaKodesh, his set apart spirit, his Holy Spirit. And you need to have the ability to find him to be faithful in your life, the humility to know that. So what we eat, what we drink, and what we clothe people in. So these are some of the things we're super passionate about, and we just want to make sure that it's accessible to all people. So we give away grain and garments, and we want to make sure that they have access to this. This is like more of our driving ministry now, if I'm real transparent. I turned down a lot of interviews for the past year and a half, because I kind of wanted to set a lot of this stuff over here and try to really learn how to be a dad and a father and a husband, and let go my hope to go hunt down the monster. Still, there was still a side of me that wants to go hunt it down and fight it like this, fight it like this. But you know what? It's better to fight with these. This is literally like the sword of Goliath. David kills Goliath and he gets the sword, and they say there's no other sword like it. And I found that's what this is. It's the information war, and this is how we can contend against it. So we try to do that, and we know that we are exhorters. We're here to help pump people up towards the truth, and that's what we're doing. So we're trying to do meetups where we can come and meet with people and speak with them and share the good news of what we've been entrusted to, and encourage them. Keep going, man. It gets better. It gets better. So never stop doubting that the Father is good, and he will a rewarder of those who diligently seek him.
And do you guys have a website that has all the information?
I'll be real honest. I haven't devoted a lot of time to my website.
Okay.
So no, but we do have snatchedfromtheflames.com is the website. I haven't added all that information into it, but on our YouTube channel, we do have all of the information in Becoming a Linenite page, or playlist, Becoming a Millenite. And we have a Facebook group as well, which is called Becoming a Linenite. And there's thousands of people that are in there that talk about a lot of these things. And you can join there as well if you're into Facebook. We also have a Discord server, the Linen Railroad. That's what we call it now, because we were living in an RV for 4.5 years, traveling around the country. We had just trying to continue to learn these lifestyles and these ways of living that we didn't have in the past. So that's what got me into natural regenerative agriculture and farming and all the animal husbandry and everything else. But those are the things that we're kind of pursuing right now. Our desire is that people would really, if you want to reach out to us, please, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to encourage you. And if any of you have any need for any of these things, please just reach out to us. We will send something to you as much as we are able to. So we love y'all.
Gosh, that's so generous. And can people donate to you? Do you guys have donation sites, PayPals or Venmos or anything if people were feeling that they wanted to gift to you?
Yes, we have PayPal, which is Snatched from the Flames at protonmail.com, and then Cash App and Venmo, and that's at the Linen Railroad, or $ the Linen Railroad for those ones. But you can see in the descriptions as well if you feel so inclined. But thank you all for the support and the opportunity to be here. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, I'd love to have you on at least one more time, but I could talk to you a million times. There's so much. I'd love to have you on too, even your wife, to talk about linen and clothes. That's stuff I'm really interested in. I think a lot of people are starting to to, think twice about the things that we've been conditioned to put on our body, whether it is, cosmetics or water that we drink or, clothing. So I'd love to have you guys on if you wanted to educate us on that sometime. That would be really cool. But,
Absolutely.
people listening, I always say, if you have an extra dollar, $5, $100, and you are feeling charitable, gift a survivor, gift them right away. And with their actual projects that they're working on, hire them, buy their books, go support them. The more eyes we can have on them, the more we can share. We're not only adding protection, but we're giving them the means and resources to continue doing this. These are not jobs that the government is ever going to give somebody like Nathan to go talk. Like he's their worst nightmare, and it's up to us to stand by them and to be their army and to be God's army and to stand by them and support them and give them the financial means and the support and the voice and the exposure so they can continue doing this. This isn't easy for any of them. None of them signed up to be public speakers, but they're doing this from the goodness of their heart so we can learn. And so, I feel like the least that we can do is go support them by purchasing their work. We have so much to learn from somebody like Nathan, and this is a really juicy book. There's so much education in it too. He really goes over how these systems work. So it's so much more is included in here, in addition to his incredible testimony that you guys are going to get out of this. So get it, give it to a friend. Books are always a great way to share this information. I know a lot of you on the other side don't always feel comfortable maybe speaking about this. Maybe you don't feel like you're credentialed enough or that you know enough about it or that you're going to trip over your words. Well, we have books for that now. Now you can gift somebody this and say, I don't know how to explain what I want to you, but here's an awesome author who went through it that you can learn from. So it's also a really good way that we can pass the torch on to somebody else. After we learn, we can go ahead and pass the torch on to the next person, and hopefully that cycle continues until everybody in the world knows about this stuff. We need to blow the top off of this. We need to really stand by the whistleblowers and the survivors and the people speaking out, because this isn't information that is ever going to be expressed in a mainstream fashion. We have to make that. It's our responsibility. Like Nathan said, if we choose to look away, we're the cowards. We're the ones that are responsible for this continuing. We need to be the ones that draw the line in the sand right now and say it stops with us. And somebody like Nathan is an amazing example of being a circuit breaker and living that example. And I think the rest of us have so much to learn from people like Nathan. So please go support Nathan. All of our links are going to be below. I'm going to list all of Nathan's links. I'll copy and paste what he has on his YouTube channel. I'm going to connect to his YouTube channel. Go support that. Again, the more eyes we have, if people do go on Nathan's page, I want them to see hundreds of thousands and millions of followers and comments, and for them to be shaken in their skin that Nathan's out there speaking, and that takes a group effort to do that. We need to have more eyes on Nathan and his family. So even just clicking subscribe on a YouTube channel can be really big for somebody who's going through something and who has gone through something so difficult. So please go support you guys. Thank you as always for supporting us. I'll have all the links once again in the show notes. And God bless you all, and we will see you next week.